Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey so ancient, so sprawling, and so utterly bizarre that it might just redefine your understanding of, well, everything. Imagine, if you will, the soft glow of a flickering oil lamp, casting long, dancing shadows across crumbling marble columns. The air around you, thick with the scent of dried herbs and distant salt spray, whispers tales of gods and monsters, of epic loves, and even more epic betrayals. You're not just listening to a story, you're stepping into a time when the very fabric of reality was being spun by divine hands, sometimes clumsily, often violently. You might feel a strange pull towards something ancient and powerful, a sense of immense unyielding forces at play. Forces that, honestly, you probably won't survive if you were actually there. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're retuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always cool to see how far these whispers travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You close your eyes, and suddenly, there is nothing. Not darkness, not silence, but an emptiness so profound it hums, vast and echoing. This is chaos, the primal void, the gaping maw from which everything else would eventually spring. You float, weightless, within this swirling, boundless abyss, feeling the nascent stirrings of what will become existence. From this incomprehensible emptiness, you sense the first distinct entities beginning to separate themselves, like oil from water. First comes Gaia, the earth, vast and fertile. It's an ancient mother solidifying beneath you, stretching out in immense, comforting plains and rugged, nascent mountains. You feel her immense, nurturing power, an almost irresistible urge to lie down and be absorbed by her. Alongside her, Tartarus emerges, a deep, gloomy chasm beneath the earth, a primordial prison for the wicked, a place of shadows and dread even before wickedness was truly defined. Then Eros, the irresistible force of love and procreation, materializes, a beautiful, compelling energy that pulls things together, creating connection and desire. And from chaos's dark embrace, Nyx, the night, unfolds like an endless velvet cloak, followed by Erebus, the primordial darkness, her shadowy consort. You perceive them not as beings with distinct forms, but as fundamental principles, vast and overwhelming presences that define the earliest boundaries of the cosmos. Gaia, the earth, is not content to simply exist. You feel her stir, her mountainous body shifting as she spontaneously gives birth to her first offspring, without the need for a mate. First, Uranus, the sky, arches high above her, a magnificent, star-studded dome, a perfect lover to her sprawling form. Then, Aurea, the mountains, rise up, their peaks scraping the newly formed sky, and Pontus, the sea, stretches out, vast and shimmering. You watch as Uranus, the sky, showers Gaia, the earth, with life-giving rain, and together they become the first divine couple, entwined in an eternal embrace. Their union is fruitful, profoundly so, but also fraught with the very first tensions of the nascent cosmos. You feel the ground tremble as Gaia gives birth to their first set of children, the 12 Titans. You see them emerge, vast and powerful, embodying cosmic forces. There's Oceanus, the boundless river that encircles the world. His sister wife Tethys, the mother of rivers and springs. Hyperion, the sun god, whose brilliant light banishes the lingering shadows of primal night. His sister wife, Theia, whose eyes bestow brilliance upon gold and silver. Cus, the titan of intellect and the axis of the heavens. Phoebe, his sister wife, the titaness of prophecy and the moon. Crius, a less prominent figure, embodying constellations. Cetus, the father of Prometheus. Atlas, Epimetheus, and Menetius titans, who would play pivotal roles later on. And then, Mnemosyne, the tightness of memory, whose influence you can almost feel, subtly shaping the very fabric of time. Themis, the tightness of divine law and order, establishing the first sense of cosmic justice. And finally, the youngest and most formidable of the male titans, Cronus, the embodiment of time itself, armed with a sharp, curved sickle. You feel a chill as he appears. There's a latent power, a simmering ambition in his gaze. You also see his sister wife, Rhea, a gentle maternal figure, often associated with fertility and motherhood, stark contrast to her brother's looming presence. But their family isn't complete with just the titans. He recoils slightly as Gaia gives birth to other, more monstrous children, born from the same divine union, but cursed with terrifying forms. First, the three Cyclopes, Brontes, Sterops, and Arges. They possess a single, blazing eye in the center of their foreheads, masters of thunder, lightning, and the forge. You hear the deep rumble of their voices, even from across the cosmic canvas. Then come the three Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones, Briareus, Codus, and Gyes. You gape in awe and a little horror as you see their immense forms, each with 100 arms and 50 heads, wielding unimaginable strength. Uranus, the sky, is not a loving father to these monstrous offsprings. He is repulsed by their appearance, fearing their power and their grotesque forms. You feel his disgust, his paranoia, as he decides to take drastic action. As each Cyclops and Hecatonchire is born, Uranus shoves them back into Gaia's womb, imprisoning them within the very earth from which they came. You feel Gaia's immense pain, a deep, agonizing ache as her children are trapped within her. She groans and tremors, her grief shaking the nascent world. This act of cruelty, of imprisoning his own offspring, marks the very first tyranny in the cosmos, a pattern of cyclical oppression that will unfortunately repeat itself. Historians still argue whether this act was purely driven by disgust or a prophetic fear of being overthrown. But the outcome is clear: immense suffering. Gaia, suffering intensely from the burden of her imprisoned children, begs the Titans for help. You feel her despair, her silent plea echoing through the cosmic void. But the older Titans, perhaps intimidated by their father's power, or simply lacking the courage, hesitate. Only Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of the male Titans, steps forward. You see the glint in his eye, the sharp determination that will define his reign. He agrees to overthrow his father. Gaia, in turn, forges a mighty sickle from the adamantine within her own body, a sharp, curved blade, and gives it to Cronus. You watch, heart pounding, as Cronus lies in wait. When Uranus descends in the evening to cover Gaia, embracing her in his starry form, Cronus springs forth from his hiding place. With a swift, brutal motion, he uses the adamantine sickle to castrate his father. You flinch, feeling the cosmic horror of the act, the sheer violence of it. Uranus screams, his divine blood, known as ichor, splattering across the universe. As his severed genitals fall into the sea, foam gathers around them, and from this divine, swirling froth, a new goddess emerges. You witness her birth, pristine and radiant, rising from the waves near the island of Cythera, then drifting to Cyprus. This is Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. Her arrival signals a profound shift, the introduction of immense beauty and desire into a world previously dominated by raw power and fear. She is born not of flesh and blood, but of the very essence of creation and cosmic violence. Truly quirky tidbit about her origins that contrasts sharply with her gentle domain. With Uranus overthrown and cast into the void, or simply receding from his active role as ruler, Cronus assumes power. You observe as he frees his Titan siblings from their father's oppressive rule, establishing the Golden Age. This is a time of idyllic peace and prosperity, when humans, not yet fully formed, but still primitive, live without strife or the need for laws. The earth provides abundantly, people don't age, and there's no hunger or disease. It's a mythical period, often romanticized by later Greek poets, like Hesiod, who envisioned it as a time when humans were truly innocent, almost childlike in their existence, completely free from toil. You might find yourself wishing you could have lived in such an era where the concept of work-life balance didn't even exist, because there was simply no work. However, even paradise has its shadows. Cronus, having deposed his own father, becomes haunted by a prophecy that he, too, would be overthrown by one of his own children. You see, the paranoia began to creep into his actions, tightening its grip on his powerful mind. Despite his golden age, he cannot escape the cycle of fear and tyranny. His sister wife Rhea gives birth to their children. One by one, Cronus swallows each infant whole immediately after birth. You watch in horror as Hestia, the goddess of the hearth; Demeter, the goddess of agriculture; Hera, the queen of the gods; Hades, the lord of the underworld, and Poseidon, the god of the sea, are all consumed by their father. He doesn't digest them, per se. He simply keeps them trapped within his immense stomach, a living prison in a desperate attempt to defy fate. It's a chilling parallel to Uranus's earlier imprisonment of his children, a clear callback to the cyclical nature of power and fear in this nascent pantheon. Rhea, consumed by grief and despair over the loss of her children, pleads with her parents, Gaia and Uranus, for guidance. They advise her on a plan to save her sixth child. You feel her desperation, her resolve hardening. When her last child, Zeus, is born on the island of Crete, Rhea secretly gives Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. Cronus, in his frantic paranoia, swallows the stone, believing it to be his newborn son. Meanwhile, you follow the infant Zeus as he is spirited away. He is hidden in a cave on Mount Ida in Crete, a place shrouded in mystery and legend. You watch as he is nursed by the goat Amalthea, whose horn later becomes the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, a symbol of endless bounty. Curates, warrior dancers, beat their shields and clash their spears outside the cave, their loud rhythms drowning out the cries of the infant Zeus, preventing Cronus from hearing him. It's a clever ruse, blending noise and nurture to ensure the safety of the future king of the gods. You see Zeus grow, nourished by divine milk and honey, protected by these fierce, devoted guardians. He matures rapidly, imbued with strength and cunning, completely unaware of his siblings trapped within his father's belly. As Zeus reaches adulthood, a powerful, charismatic young god, he is ready to confront his father. You feel the building tension, the sense of destiny about to unfold. He returns to the world of the Titans, perhaps disguised, or using a cunning trick, and eventually serves Cronus a drink mixed with a powerful emetic given to him by Gaia or Metis, the Titaness of cunning. Cronus, violently ill, vomits up the stone he swallowed, and then, one by one, he disgorges Zeus's older siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, now fully grown and ready for battle. Imagine the sheer awkwardness of that family reunion. They are grateful to their younger brother for their freedom, and together, they decide to wage war against their tyrannical father and his fellow Titans. This is the beginning of the Titanomachy, the great war between the younger Olympian gods and the elder Titans. You sense the very foundations of the cosmos beginning to shake. On one side stand Zeus and his siblings, empowered by their newfound freedom and a burning desire for justice. On the other, Cronus and most of the Titans, entrenched in their ancient power, determined to retain control. It's a clash of generations, of old order versus new, and the stakes couldn't be higher. You feel the gathering storm, the immense energies coalescing for a conflict that will define the very shape of the universe for eons to come. Zeus, with his raw power and strategic mind, begins to gather allies, knowing that the Titans are formidable opponents, not easily defeated. The stage is set for an epic, cosmos-shattering struggle, and you, an unseen observer, are right in the thick of it. feeling the tremors of what's to come. Zeus, knowing he can't face the entrenched might of the Titans alone, first descends into the gloomy depths of Tartarus. You accompany him, feeling the oppressive weight of the earth above you, the air thick with primordial dust, and the stale scent of ancient despair. This is where Uranus had imprisoned the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, and it's where Zeus plans to find his most powerful allies. You feel a surge of anticipation as Zeus, using his nascent power, shatters the adamantine chains that bind these monstrous beings. Imagine the relief, the sheer, unbridled joy of being freed after eons trapped in the dark. It's like finally getting out of that super long, mandatory family dinner you've been dreading for months. The Cyclopes, Brontes, Sterops, and Argazar, eternally grateful, as masters of the forge. They repay Zeus by crafting him his most iconic weapon, the thunderbolt. You see the raw power coalesce in his hand, a crackling, blinding bolt of lightning, utterly devastating. For Hades, they forge the helm of darkness, a cap that renders its wearer completely invisible, perfect for someone who prefers to lurk in the shadows. And honestly, a massive tactical advantage for any sneaky mission. And for Poseidon, they create the mighty trident, a three-pronged spear capable of stirring the seas into furious storms, shaking the earth, and even shattering mountains. You feel the tremor in the ground just contemplating its power. The Hecatonchires, with their 100 hands and 50 heads each, pledge their immense strength to Zeus, becoming his personal enforcers, hurling colossal rocks and entire mountains at the Titans with terrifying precision. They're basically the ultimate artillery unit, raining down chaos from above. Not all Titans side with Cronus, however. You observe as Prometheus, the Titan of forethought, and his brother Epimetheus, the Titan of afterthought, wisely choose to align themselves with Zeus. Prometheus, ever the clever one, foresaw Cronus's inevitable defeat. Themis, the Titaness of divine law, also joined Zeus, bringing her wisdom and strategic counsel, along with her daughter Medusa, the Titaness of cunning. Mnemosyne, the Titaness of memory, remains neutral, but her presence, quietly, supports the new order by preserving the very narrative of this conflict. It is a testament to Zeus' growing influence that he can sway even some of the elder generation. The Titanomachi rages for 10 long years. You witness the sheer scale of the conflict, the entire cosmos becoming a battlefield. Mount Othrys, the Titan stronghold, faces off against Mount Olympus, where Zeus and his allies established their base. The very sky splits with thunder, the earth groans underfoot, and the seas churn with the clash of divine power. It's a sensory overload, the flash of 1,000 lightning bolts, the roar of Cyclope's forges, the 100-handed barrage of the Hecatonchires raining down on the Titans, the earth-shattering impact of Cronus's scythe meeting Poseidon's trident. You feel the seismic shocks reverberating through the nascent universe, watching as mountains are ripped from their foundations and hurled across vast distances. Imagine the sheer, raw energy unleashed. It's like a supernova, but with more shouting and family drama. The Titans, ancient and powerful, fight with fierce determination. Achilles, one of Iapetus' sons, is a formidable warrior, leading the charge against the Olympians. Cronus, wielding his terrible scythe, is still a force to be reckoned with, his power over time making him seem invulnerable at times. But the Olympians have momentum, innovation, and Zeus's decisive leadership on their side. Zeus unleashes the full might of his thunderbolts, a continuous barrage of divine electricity, incinerating the air and turning the very bedrock of the world molten. This isn't just a battle, it's a cosmic reordering, a violent childbirth of a new age. Finally, after a decade of ceaseless combat, the Olympians gained the upper hand. You watch as Zeus, with a final, overwhelming volley of thunderbolts, strikes down Cronus. The mighty Titan, embodiment of time, collapses, his reign officially over. The hecatonters, in a coordinated effort, seized the defeated Titans Cronus and most of his male siblings like Cryas, Apatis, and Kuzand, hurled them into the deepest abyss of Tartarus. This time, there's no escape. They are bound by unbreakable chains of adamantine, guarded by the very hundred-handed ones they once scorned. Atlas, for his prominent role in the war, receives a unique and fitting punishment. He is condemned to bear the weight of the heavens on his shoulders for eternity. You might think about your own shoulder pain after carrying a heavy backpack for too long. Then multiply that by, roughly a few quadrillion tons. Forever. It puts things into perspective, doesn't it? With Cronus and the rebellious Titans imprisoned, the war is won. A new era dawns, heralded by the victorious Olympians. You feel the cosmic sigh of relief, the universe settling into a new, albeit still volatile, equilibrium. The three most powerful brothers Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades draw lots to divide the cosmos among themselves. Zeus, predictably, draws the sky and becomes the supreme ruler of the gods. King of Olympus, wielding the thunderbolt as his symbol of authority. Poseidon claims the sea, taking dominion over its vast, untamed depths, its creatures, and its unpredictable storms. Hades, ever the stoic and somewhat brooding sibling, draws the underworld, becoming the lord of the dead and all the riches beneath the earth. It's an arrangement that sets the stage for future squabbles and misunderstandings, because, let's be honest, even divine siblings have their issues. The other gods share various domains, solidifying their positions in the new Olympian hierarchy. Hestia remains the gentle goddess of the hearth. Demeter claims agriculture and the harvest, and Hera, Zeus's sister and future wife, becomes the queen of the gods, goddess of marriage and childbirth, a rather ironic domain given Zeus's future romantic escapades. But the cosmos isn't quite done throwing curveballs at the new rulers. Just when you think things might settle down for a bit, like after a major corporate restructuring, two more massive challenges emerge to test the Olympians' fledgling reign. First, Gaia, ever the protective mother, is not at all pleased with how her children, the Titans, have been treated. Imprisoning them in Tartarus is not exactly a thank you for the divine lineage card. In her wrath, she gives birth to a new race of monstrous beings, the Gigantes, or giants. These aren't just big folks, are colossal, often depicted as having snake-like legs, immense strength, and a fiery temper. They are born from the blood of Uranus, which splattered on Gaia when Cronus castrated him, making them half-divine, half-earthly nightmares. This leads to the Gigantomachy, another epic battle for cosmic supremacy. You watch as the giants, led by the formidable Alcyoneus and Porphyrion, rise up against the Olympians, their roars shaking the very heavens. The prophecy states that the giants can only be defeated if a mortal fights alongside the gods. So, Heracles, Zeus's incredibly strong, albeit not yet born in this narrative, demigod son, will eventually play a crucial role here. But for now, the gods are on their own, grappling with these new, powerful foes. Athena, always the tactician, is particularly vital in this conflict, displaying her prowess in warfare. Ares, the god of war, revels in the chaos, though his methods are often more brute force than strategy. Hephaestus, the divine smith, who will be born a bit later, but will be ready to fight when needed, is already busy forging divine weapons for the gods. The battle is fierce, a brutal melee of gods and giants. A truly supersized brawl that makes the Titanomachy look almost like a warm-up act. It's less about grand strategic maneuvers and more about raw, unadulterated slugfests. Imagine a very angry, very large wrestling match, but with lightning bolts and mountains being thrown around like popcorn. Even more terrifying than the giants is Gaia's final, most dreadful offspring. Born from her union with Tartarus himself, Typhoeus, you feel the very air grow heavy, the light dimming as this creature emerges. Typhoeus is described as the largest and most fearsome monster in all of Greek mythology, a truly cosmic threat. Hera has 100 snakeheads that hiss and spitfire eyes that flash with terrifying red light, and a voice that can imitate the roars of wild beasts or the crackling of flames, truly a master of unsettling sound effects. His body is covered in wings and scales, and his hands and feet are made of serpents. Basically, if you were to combine every nightmare you've ever had into one being, and then make it countenance-sized, you'd get something close to Typhoeus. Typhoeus rises from the earth, determined to overthrow Zeus and claim cosmic dominion for himself. You witness the sheer terror he inspires, even many of the gods, despite their newfound power and confidence from defeating the Titans, flee in panic, transforming themselves into animals and seeking refuge in Egypt. This is a genuinely humbling moment for the Olympians, a stark reminder that their rule is still precarious, that chaos still lurks at the edges of existence. Only Zeus, courageous to a fault, or perhaps just too stubborn to run, stands his ground. The battle between Zeus and Typhoeus is arguably the most dramatic and pivotal confrontation in Greek mythology. A true struggle for the soul of the cosmos. You watch, captivated, as Zeus unleashes his thunderbolts, a continuous volley of divine lightning. Typhoeus counters with searing flames and suffocating smoke from his 100 heads. The air crackles with energy, the earth shakes violently, and the seas boil from the immense heat and force. At one point, Typhoeus even manages to wound Zeus, severing his sinews and stealing his thunderbolts. You feel a pang of dread, thinking, this is it. The new reign is over before it even properly began. But Hermes, the swift messenger god, and the resourceful Egyptian managed to recover Zeus's sinews and restore his strength. It's a moment of desperate teamwork and quick thinking, proving that even the most powerful god needs help sometimes. Reinvigorated, Zeus pursues Typhoeus across the world, finally trapping him beneath Mount Etna in Sicily. With a final crushing blow, Zeus casts the monstrous creature into the deepest pits of Tartarus, or perhaps, in some versions, buries him beneath the mountain itself, which is why Etna still occasionally erupts, a sign of Typhoeus' restless fury beneath the earth. It as a testament to Zeus' unparalleled power that he alone defeats this ultimate monstrous threat, solidifying his position as the undisputed king of the gods and protector of the cosmos. After this, no major cosmic power dares to challenge his rule directly. With these threats subdued, the Olympian gods finally begin to truly establish their new order. Olympus, their majestic home, becomes a place of divine revelry and serious business. You imagine it as a high-tech, marble-clad executive suite, complete with celestial amenities and an endless supply of ambrosia and nectar, the food and drink of the gods that grants them immortality. Here, they hold their councils, feast, and squabble over mortal affairs and their own intertwined destinies. The Olympians began to expand their numbers, largely through Zeus's prolific romantic endeavors, which would become legendary in their own right. From his first wife, Medusa, the tightness of cunning, whom he swallows after a prophecy suggests her child will be mightier than him. Yes, another delightful family tradition, Athena is born. You watch in awe as she springs fully grown and fully armed from Zeus' head, after he develops a splitting headache. She is a goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare, and crafts, already embodying intellect and strength. Her birth is a stark contrast to the more organic, messy births of earlier deities, showcasing a new, more refined, albeit utterly bizarre, method of divine procreation. Hera, having endured the swallowing ordeal and now witnessing Zeus's casual procreation from his skull, becomes increasingly resentful of his philandering ways. In an act of defiant, immaculate conception, she produces Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge and fire, without Zeus's involvement. His limping gait is sometimes attributed to Hera casting him away from Olympus in disgust at his appearance. You see, the divine drama already unfolding, the petty jealousies and powerful rivalries that will define the Olympian family. Other major Olympians began to take their rightful places. Apollo, the god of music, poetry, light, and healing, and Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, and the moon, are born to Zeus and Leto. Hermes, the swift messenger of the gods, trickster, and patron of travelers, merchants, and thieves, is born to Zeus and Maia. Ares, the brutal god of war, is born to Zeus and Hera. A stark contrast to Athena's strategic approach to conflict. Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, and ecstasy, will later emerge, bringing both joy and madness to the world. Aphrodite, already born from the sea foam, takes her place among the pantheon, her irresistible beauty and power over love influencing gods and mortals alike. So, the pantheon is assembled. The new hierarchy is firmly established. Zeus, the king, rules from high Olympus, surrounded by his powerful siblings and increasingly numerous children. The universe has been shaped, reshaped, and settled into a structure that will largely endure for millennia. But don't think for a second that this means peace and quiet. Oh no, dear listener. The divine family is just getting started with their drama, their power struggles, their epic quests, and their endlessly complicated interactions with the mortal world, which is just about to become very, very interesting. You've seen the cosmic foundations laid, but the true tapestry of Greek mythology, with all its vibrant, chaotic threads, is only just beginning to weave itself. The universe has been shaped, reshaped, and settled into a structure that will largely endure for millennia. But don't think for a second that this means peace and quiet. Oh no, dear listener. God. The divine family is just getting started with their drama, their power struggles, their epic quests, and their endlessly complicated interactions with the mortal world, which is just about to become very, very interesting. You've seen the cosmic foundations laid, but the true tapestry of Greek mythology, with all its vibrant, chaotic threads, is only just beginning to weave itself. Now, with the cosmos finally stable and Olympus humming like a well-oiled, albeit incredibly dysfunctional, divine headquarters, it was time for the gods to populate this magnificent and sometimes terrifying world. Enter humanity. There are a few conflicting accounts here, because, ancient myths are like trying to piece together a story from a group chat where half the participants were drunk. But the most popular version, and the one that sets the stage for a lot of future divine meddling, involves the titans Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus. Remember Prometheus, the titan of forethought, the clever one who sided with Zeus, and Epimetheus, the titan of afterthought. Okay, well, Zeus, perhaps still feeling a bit nervous about delegating after the whole swallowing Medusa incident, tasked these two with creating living creatures and distributing qualities among them. You watch as Epimetheus, in his typical impulsive fashion, rushes headlong into the task. He starts doling out traits like speed to cheetahs, strength to lions, cunning to foxes, wings to birds, fur to bears, and shells to turtles. He's incredibly generous, meticulously ensuring that every animal has something unique, some special advantage for survival. You can almost see him with a checklist, gleefully ticking off sharp claws, thick hide, night vision. But then he looks up, sheepish, as Prometheus approaches. Bro, Epimetheus mumbles, scratching his head. I might have, run out of qualities, and I haven't even gotten to whatever comes next. You feel a sense of impending doom. Yup, you guessed it. Epimetheus, in his eagerness, completely forgot about humanity. He gave away all the cool stuff to the animals. Humans were left naked, defenseless, without fur or claws or speed. Basically, the universe's most vulnerable, squishy creatures. It's like being the last kid picked for dodgeball, but on a cosmic scale. Prometheus, ever the sympathetic and far-sighted one, felt a profound pity for this new, unprotected species. It took clay from the earth, mixed it with water. You can almost smell the damp earth, feel the cool, malleable mud in your hands, and molded humans in the image of the gods themselves, giving them an upright posture, unlike the beasts. He then breathed life into them, and for a moment, you witnessed the spark of consciousness, the nascent stirrings of thought and emotion. But he knew this wasn't enough. Humans, as they were, couldn't survive. They needed something more, something to distinguish them, to give them a fighting chance against the formidable creatures Prometheus had so generously equipped. So, Prometheus, in an act of profound compassion and direct defiance of Zeus, journeyed to Olympus. Or, in some versions, he took a reed and stole the fire from Hephaestus' forge, or from the sun god Apollo's chariot. Either way, you witness his clandestine act, the furtive flick of a flame, the precious spark cupped in his hands. He brought this divine fire down to humanity. You feel the warmth of it, the incredible potential it holds, not just for heat and light, but for craftsmanship, for cooking, for forging tools, for civilization itself. It was the ultimate game changer, the technological leap forward that would set humanity apart. It allowed them to cook, to ward off wild animals, to create, to think, to build. Suddenly, those squishy, defenseless beings had a chance. It's basically the ancient Greek equivalent of giving primitive humans Wi-Fi and unlimited data. Zeus, however, was furious, beyond furious. He saw Prometheus's act as a direct challenge to his authority, a blatant overreach. It wasn't just about the fire. It was about cosmic power dynamics. He didn't want humans to be too powerful, too independent. He preferred them in their place, subservient and worshipful. This was also a clear sign of his increasing tyrannical tendencies, a shadow of Cronus, perhaps, that he couldn't quite shake. For his audacious defiance, Prometheus was subjected to one of the most agonizing, eternal punishments imaginable. You see him chained to a pillar in the Caucasus Mountains, exposed to the elements. And every day, an enormous eagle, sent by Zeus, would descend and tear out his liver. And every night, because he was immortal, his liver would regenerate, only for the agony to begin anew the next morning. It's a truly gruesome fate, a stark reminder that even in the Golden Age, or what should have been a golden age for humanity, divine wrath was swift and merciless. Historians debate whether this specific punishment reflects an ancient understanding of the liver's role in the body, or simply its size and capacity for regeneration in myth. Either way, yikes, Zeus wasn't done. He decided to punish humanity, too, for accepting the divine gift. He wanted to teach them, and Prometheus, a lesson about the dangers of unchecked curiosity and divine gifts. So, he ordered Hephaestus, the master craftsman, to create a being of unparalleled beauty and irresistible charm. You watch as Hephaestus, perhaps grumbling a little about Zeus's demands. After all, Hephaestus was Hera's son by immaculate conception. Not exactly Zeus's favorite, sculpts a woman from earth and water. Athena breathes life into her and teaches her crafts. Aphrodite bestows upon her grace and allure. Hermes, ever the smooth talker, gives her a deceptive mind and persuasive words. Hey, name her Pandora, meaning all gifts, or all gifted. Pandora was a masterpiece of divine deception, sent down to earth as a gift to Prometheus, because who else would fall for it? Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept gifts from the gods, but Prometheus, true to his name, forgot all about the warning in his infatuation with Pandora's beauty. You can almost hear the collective groan from Olympus. Pandora arrived with a large jar, often mistakenly called a box in later translations. Thanks to Erasmus's mistranslation in the 16th century, which is a neat little linguistic tidbit that drives classicists absolutely bonkers. She was explicitly warned not to open it. But the gods had also endowed her with intense curiosity. You feel her internal struggle, the gnawing desire to peek inside, to know what secrets the beautiful, forbidden jar held. It's the ultimate psychological torture. It's like leaving a plate of freshly baked cookies next to someone on a diet and saying, "Don't even think about it." You watch as her curiosity wins out. With trembling hands, she lifts the lid. Out swarm all the evils and misfortunes that plague humanity. Toil, sickness, death, misery, pain, war, envy, hatred, despair. You feel the cold dread as these shadowy forms, these palpable burdens, escape and spread across the world, transforming humanity's idyllic existence into a life of struggle. It's a literal unleashing of hell on earth. Just as she slams the lid shut in horror, one last thing remains trapped at the bottom of the jar. Elpis, the spirit of hope. Historians still argue whether hope remaining inside was a blessing or a curse. Was it meant to give humanity the strength to endure the evils, or was it a cruel trick, perpetuating suffering by giving false comfort? Personally, I lean towards the former, because who wants to live in a world with all the misery and no hope? That's just a bad Monday, amplified to eternity. So, humanity now lived in a world filled with hardship, a stark contrast to the earlier golden age under Cronus. This leads us to Hesiod's poetic concept of the 5 ages of man, which describes a slow, depressing decline from paradise. You might recognize this pattern from every sci-fi movie where humanity messes things up. The golden race. This was the original utopian period under Cronus. You could almost feel the sun on your skin, the gentle breeze, the abundant food appearing without effort. People lived like gods, without toil, grief, or old age. They died peacefully in their sleep, returning to the earth as benevolent guardian spirits. Think of it as humanity's very first all-inclusive luxury resort. No bills, no bad reviews, just pure bliss. The Silver Race. Zeus created this race after overthrowing Cronus. You sense an immediate decline. They were far inferior to the Golden Race, foolish and violent, refusing to honor the gods. They lived incredibly long childhoods, like 100 years, but spent their adulthoods in strife. Zeus, fed up with their impiety and general naughtiness, eventually destroyed them for their arrogance. It's like the universe's first major reformat, because the operating system kept crashing. The Bronze Race. This race was crafted from ash wood, tough stuff, symbolically. You feel the shift in atmosphere. These were fearsome, warlike men, obsessed with conflict and violence. Everything they made was bronze. Their weapons, their tools, even their houses. They consumed themselves through constant warfare, ultimately destroying each other. They descended to Hades, leaving behind no memory or trace. It's the ancient world's version of a self-destructive war game with no save points. The heroic race. Finally, a bright spot. This race was nobler and more just, made up of the mighty heroes and demigods of legend. You feel the stirring of epic destinies, the sense of great deeds about to unfold. These were the heroes who fought at Thebes and Troy, undertaking legendary quests. Many of them died in glorious battle, though some were granted special immortality by Zeus, dwelling in the Isles of the Blessed at the ends of the earth. This is when the stories really start getting juicy, the kind you curl up with and ignore your alarm clock for. The Iron Race. And here we are, dear listener. You feel the weariness, the pervasive sense of injustice and toil. This is our current age, the age of endless labor, misery, and moral decay. People never cease from weariness and sorrow. Children dishonor parents, oaths are broken, justice is corrupted, and evil runs rampant. Zeus will eventually destroy this race too, when they have fallen so low that they are born with gray hair. It's not exactly a comforting thought for your bedtime, is it? But hey, at least we have hope, right? So, with humanity now present, struggling through the Iron Age, or at least the early stages of it, depending on which mythological timeline you follow, the Olympians truly began their complex, often problematic, interactions with mortals. And at the heart of much of this interaction, for better or worse, was Zeus. Zeus, as king of the gods, had a serious, shall we say, outreach program with humanity. This usually involved transforming himself into various animals, golden showers, or other clever disguises to pursue mortal women. Hera, his long-suffering sister wife, was perpetually outraged by his philandering, and her vengeance, unlike Zeus's fleeting passions, was legendary and often disproportionate, falling most heavily on the innocent mortal women and their offspring. You feel the tension, the underlying domestic discord that fuels so many myths. It's less divine majesty and more eternal marital spat that affects everyone. Let's dive into one of the earliest and most telling examples of Zeus' wanderlust and Hera's wrath, the story of Io. Io was a beautiful princess of Argos, a priestess of Hera herself, which just adds an extra layer of delicious irony to the whole affair. You envision her, radiant and innocent, performing her sacred duties. Zeus, however, spots her from high above Olympus. You see the glint in his eye, the mischievous smile, the immediate thought of, a challenge. To hide his dalliance from Hera, Zeus shrouds the entire region in a thick, dark cloud. You feel the sudden, unnatural gloom, the oppressive blanket of vapor as he descends. But Hera, goddess of marriage and queen of divine eavesdroppers, immediately senses something amiss. This isn't just any cloud. It's too thick, too localized, smells suspiciously like her husband's shenanigans. You can almost hear her sniff, her eyes narrowing. She sweeps down, parting the clouds with her divine presence. Ever, the quick thinker or panicker barely has time to react. He transforms Io into a beautiful, gleaming white heifer, hoping to pass her off as a new addition to his herd. You watch in slight amusement, and a little pity, as the poor princess finds herself suddenly bovine, confused and trapped in a four-legged, tail-swishing body. What a lovely cow, dear husband, Hera purrs, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness that's far more menacing than any shout. And where did you acquire such a magnificent creature? Zeus stammers out some flimsy excuse about her spontaneously appearing from the earth, which, coming from the guy who was born from a rock, isn't entirely unbelievable to an outsider. But Hera knows better. She's quite charming, Hera continues, circling the bewildered cow. Perhaps you wouldn't mind if I had her as a gift. Zeus, trapped, couldn't refuse without exposing himself. You feel his reluctant nod. So, Hera takes possession of Io, but she's far from naive. To ensure Zeus couldn't get near Io again, and to punish Io for simply existing and being beautiful, Hera assigned an unblinking, utterly vigilant guard, Argus Panoptes. You imagine him, truly a sight to behold, a giant covered in 100 eyes, scattered all over his body, like a walking, all-seeing security camera network. While some of his eyes slept, others remained open, constantly watching. There was no escape for Io. She grazed eternally, her cow moans a constant lament for her lost humanity, her human tears mingling with her bovine tears as she looked back at her parents, who did not recognize their daughter in her new form. You feel her despair, the sheer indignity of her situation. Zeus, feeling a twinge of guilt, or perhaps just annoyed at being thwarted, called upon his clever son, Hermes. You see Hermes, quick and cunning, with his winged sandals, and Odysseus, arriving on the scene. Hermes, disguised as a shepherd, approaches Argus. He plays his pipes, weaving hypnotic melodies, telling long, credibly boring stories, until, one by one, all 100 of Argus's eyes finally close in a deep, unavoidable sleep. You feel the quiet relief as the last eye blinks shut. Then, with a swift, decisive stroke, Hermes beheads Argus. Hera, however, was not one to be easily defeated, especially when her pride was involved. She mourned her faithful servant, Argus, and in a truly iconic move, preserved his 100 eyes by placing them on the tail of her sacred bird, the peacock. So, the next time you see a peacock fanning its magnificent tail, remember those iridescent eyes were once the perpetually watchful gaze of a hundred-eyed giant. Quirky, beautiful, and slightly morbid origin story for a bird's plumage. But Hera's vengeance on Io was far from over. She sent a relentless, maddening gadfly to sting Io continuously, driving her in agony across the entire world. Hugh filled the incessant buzzing, the sharp, painful jabs, the constant urge to flee. Io, still in her cow form, was forced to wander without rest across the plains of Greece. Through the Bosporus, which means Oxford or cow crossing in Greek, a direct reference to her journey, a neat little geographical etymology for you, across Asia Minor and eventually all the way to Egypt. You feel her exhaustion, her endless suffering. Finally, in Egypt, exhausted and driven to the brink of madness, Io was released from her torment by Zeus. He restored her to her human form, and there she gave birth to a son, Epaphus, who would become a king in Egypt. This is how the divine lineage of the gods began to intertwine deeply with human royal lines, setting the stage for more heroes, more kings, and, inevitably, more drama. It's a pattern you'll see repeated countless times. Zeus pursues, Hera punishes, and innocent mortals suffer the cosmic fallout. And that, dear listener, is just one small, bizarre slice of the endlessly complicated, often tragic, but always fascinating interactions between gods and mortals in this very, very messy universe. Sleep tight, knowing that at least your family drama probably doesn't involve gadflies and hundred-eyed giants. Sleep tight, knowing that at least your family drama probably doesn't involve gadflies and hundred-eyed giants. Now, as you might have gathered, Zeus had a bit of a type, and that type was anyone not Hera, and his methods, always theatrical, often involving a convenient animal transformation. Let us plunge into a few more of these cosmic dating profiles that shaped the very geography and destiny of the ancient world. First up, there's Europa, another princess. This time from the Phoenician city of Tyre. You imagine her, graceful and carefree, gathering flowers by the sea with her handmaidens, perhaps singing a little tune. Zeus, naturally, spots her from his lofty perch on Olympus. Oh, a new target, can almost hear him exclaim, rubbing his hands together with glee. To avoid Hera's ever-watchful gaze, and perhaps to add a touch of romantic flair or creepiness, depending on your perspective, he transforms himself into a magnificent, snow-white bull. Now, this wasn't just any bull. He was gentle, with soft, liquid eyes, and a sweet, musky scent, quite unlike the usual snorting, stamping variety. You picture him mingling with Europa's father's herd, looking utterly harmless, almost inviting. Europa, intrigued by this remarkably docile and beautiful creature, approaches him cautiously. You see her stroking his white flank. Then, emboldened by his gentleness, she playfully climbs onto his back. Just for a moment, she might have giggled. Big mistake. The moment she was comfortably seated, the bull, who was, of course, Zeus, bolted. He plunged into the sea, swimming with astonishing speed across the vast expanse of the Mediterranean. You feel the spray of the waves on your face, the wind whipping through your hair. As you watch Europa cling desperately to his powerful neck, her cries swallowed by the ocean's roar. She's abducted, carried far from her home and family, all for a divine fling. Talk about a blind date gone wrong. He carried her all the way to the island of Crete, a place that would become profoundly significant in Greek mythology. Here, he revealed his true form and, well, did what Zeus did best. Together, they had 3 sons, the most famous of whom was Minos, who would later become the legendary king of Crete, known for his powerful navy, his wise laws, and, perhaps most famously, for building the labyrinth to house his stepson, the Minotaur. And that, dear listener, is how the continent of Europe got its name from this abducted Phoenician princess. Historians note that this myth could reflect ancient connections and migrations between the Near East and the burgeoning Aegean civilizations. It's a neat little piece of etymological history, making a whole continent essentially named after Zeus's latest conquest. Next, let's consider Dano, princess of Argos, the same region as Io, cause apparently Zeus had a preferred hunting ground. Her father, King Achilles, received a chilling prophecy. He would be killed by his own grandson. Naturally, being a sensible, if slightly paranoid king, he locked Dano away in a bronze tower, an impenetrable prison with no doors or windows to ensure she'd never meet a man. You feel the claustrophobia of that tower, the desperate loneliness. But as we've learned, mere walls, even bronze ones, are no match for the king of the gods. Zeus, spotting Dana's beauty through a crack, or perhaps just willing himself inside divine privileges, am I right? Transformed himself into a shower of golden rain. You watch, fascinated, as the glistening, shimmering droplets seep through the tower's cracks, perhaps through a tiny vent, or even just through the atmosphere itself, coalescing into Zeus's form within the chamber. It's less romantic serenade and more divine home invasion by liquid gold. Soon after, Dano gave birth to a son, Perseus, one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. King Achilles, upon discovering a baby in his seemingly impregnable tower, was understandably horrified and terrified. He refused to believe Zeus was the father, probably thought Dano was making excuses for a scandalous affair, unwilling to directly kill his daughter or grandson for fear of divine retribution. He instead put them both into a large wooden chest and cast them out to sea. The key, feel the terrifying helplessness of being adrift on the vast, unforgiving ocean at the mercy of the waves. But fate, or perhaps Poseidon's benevolent currents, guided the chest to the island of Seriphos, where they were rescued by a fisherman named Deities. Perseus, like Zeus, was destined for greatness. His future adventures, which include slaying Medusa, already waiting in the wings. Then there's the story of Leda, the beautiful queen of Sparta, wife of King Tyndareus. Zeus, ever creative with his disguises, decided a swan was the perfect form for this particular dalliance. You imagine him, graceful and majestic, gliding across a lake where Leda was bathing, or perhaps walking along its banks. He feigned distress, seeking refuge from a pursuing eagle, thereby tricking Leda into cradling him for comfort. You wince a little at the audacity. The result of this avian encounter was famously unusual. Leda produced 2 eggs. From one egg, produced by Zeus, came Helen, whose beauty would famously launch 1,000 ships and spark the Trojan War, and Pollux Polydeuces, a skilled boxer. From the other egg, produced by King Tyndareus, came Clytemnestra, who would murder her husband, Agamemnon, and Castor, a renowned horseman. So, you have 2 sets of twins, one divine, one mortal, all born from the same mother at the same time, from 2 different fathers and 2 different acts of conception. Talk about a complicated family tree. It's a geneticist's nightmare and a mythologist's dream, weaving together the fates of some of the most iconic figures in all of Greek legend. The idea of swan song takes on a whole new meaning when you consider this myth. But while Zeus was busy populating the world with demigods, Hera was seething. And few of Zeus's affairs brought out her full, terrifying wrath, more than the one with Semele, a princess of Thebes, and the subsequent birth of Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry. You see, Semele, young and beautiful, a mortal caught in the crosshairs of divine jealousy. Zeus, smitten as usual, promised her anything she desired, swearing on the unbreakability of the river Styx, an oath even Zeus himself couldn't break without facing dire consequences. It's like signing an unbreakable cosmic contract. Hera, upon discovering this latest infidelity, devised a truly cruel scheme. She disguised herself as Semele's old nurse, Beru, insinuating herself into Semele's confidence. You can almost hear her whispering poison into Semele's ear, planting seeds of doubt and insecurity. "Are you sure your lover is truly Zeus?" Hera crooned, with a sickeningly sweet tone. If he really loves you, let him appear to you in his true divine form, as he appears to Hera. Then you will know for sure. Smiley, young and naive, fell for the trap. She begged Zeus to reveal himself in his full glory. Zeus, trapped by his Styxian oath, protested. He knew that no mortal could behold his true form and survive. His divine presence was simply too powerful, too overwhelming. But Semele, convinced by Hera's insidious whispers, persisted, demanding he fulfill his promise. You feel the tension, the desperate pleas of Zeus, the stubborn insistence of Semele. Finally, with a heavy heart, bound by his oath, Zeus appeared to her as the Lord of the Thunderbolt. Just as he would appear to Hera. You witnessed a terrifying spectacle. The blinding flashes of lightning, the deafening peals of thunder, the searing heat of his divine aura. Semele, overwhelmed by the sheer force of his presence, was instantly incinerated, reduced to ashes. It's a truly tragic and brutal lesson about being careful what you wish for when dealing with omnipotent beings. However, Zeus managed to snatch the unborn infant from Semele's ashes. The baby was premature, still too small to survive on its own. So, in an extraordinary act, Zeus surgically implanted the child into his own thigh, where it continued to grow and develop until it was ready to be born a second time. You feel the bizarre intimacy of this act, the raw, almost grotesque, paternal care. When the time came, Dionysus, the twice-born god, emerged from Zeus's thigh. This unconventional birth sets Dionysus apart from the other Olympians, foreshadowing his unique domain and often wild, ecstatic nature. To protect him from Hera's continued wrath, Zeus initially entrusted him to Hermes, who took him to be raised by nymphs and later by the satyrs and the wise centaur Chiron. Dionysus would grow to be the god of wine, ecstasy, madness, ritual, frenzy, and theater, bringing both liberating joy and terrifying chaos wherever he went. Some versions even say Semele was eventually rescued from the underworld by Dionysus himself, becoming a goddess among the immortals, rare, posthumous, happy ending in these myths. And what about Hera's absolute nemesis, the most famous demigod of all? Let's talk about Heracles, or Hercules, as the Romans called him. Zeus, never one to learn his lesson, fell deeply in love with Alcmene, the beautiful wife of Amphitryon, a king of tyrants. To seduce her, Zeus disguised himself as Amphitryon, returning victorious from battle. He even extended the night to 3 times its normal length, ensuring he had plenty of quality time. You feel the weight of that stretch time, the abnormal stillness of the world. It's like a cosmic time dilation field just for a divine rendezvous. Hera, predictably, was incandescent with rage. Her persecution of Heracles began even before his birth. When Alcmene was about to give birth, Zeus publicly declared that the child born that day in the lineage of Perseus would be a great ruler. Hera, ever the strategist, saw her chance for mischief. She sped to Argos and used her divine power to hasten the birth of Eurystheus, Alcmene's cousin, who was born prematurely before Heracles. Thus Eurystheus, the weaker and less noble man, became the destined king, and Heracles, when he eventually performed his famous labors, would be forced to serve him. Meanwhile, Hera delayed Heracles' birth, ensuring he missed his moment. It's a prime example of divine bureaucracy and meddling. Even in his cradle, Heracles faced Hera's wrath. You see him, a tiny infant, in his crib. Hera sent 2 venomous serpents to kill him. But the infant, Heracles, already possessing immense divine strength, strangled them with his bare hands, one in each tiny fist, before anyone could react. You can almost hear his infant gurgles, completely unaware of the deadly threat he just neutralized. It's like an infant doing a CrossFit workout without even trying. This act terrified his foster father, Amphitryon, and confirmed Heracles' extraordinary, superhuman nature. Despite, or perhaps Because of Hera's constant torment throughout his life, Heracles grew into the strongest of all mortals, embodying raw physical power and unwavering endurance. Hera's relentless persecution would ultimately drive him to perform his famous 12 labors, series of seemingly impossible tasks that would cleanse him of a maddening crime. It's also brought on by Hera's influence and ultimately lead him to achieve apotheosis, becoming a god himself. But that's a story for much, much later, as those labors alone could fill several nights of storytelling. So, you see the pattern emerging: Zeus's insatiable appetite for mortal women, Hera's furious vengeance, and the innocent, or sometimes not so innocent mortals caught in the middle. These divine dalliances are not just titillating tales. They're the genesis points for countless heroes, kings, and entire royal lineages that will populate the Greek myths. They are the origin stories of future sagas, setting up conflicts and destinies that will stretch for generations. Beyond Zeus's prolific baby-making, the other Olympians were also settling into their roles and developing their own distinct personalities and domains, often interacting with mortals in ways that were equally dramatic, though perhaps less overtly sexual. Take Hephaestus, for example. We mentioned his birth from Hera, an act of defiance against Zeus. You envisioned him strong and muscular despite his limp, patiently toiling at his forge deep beneath volcanoes, crafting magnificent artifacts for gods and mortals alike. He is the divine artisan, the god of fire, metalworking, sculpture, and craftsmanship. He built the golden palaces of Olympus, forged Zeus's thunderbolts, and crafted countless other wonders, from Pandora's jar to the intricate armor of Achilles. His realm is the workshop, filled with the clang of hammers on anvils, the hiss of quenching metal, and the roar of fiery furnaces. He's the hard-working, salt, tough-to-earth type of god, often contrasted with the more glamorous or warlike deities. His limping gait, attributed to either Hera throwing him from Olympus in disgust, or from being injured in a squabble between Zeus and Hera, highlights his unique vulnerability among the flawless gods. It's a relatable touch, reminding you that even gods can have disabilities or imperfections. Then there's Athena, born fully armed from Zeus's head after he swallowed Medusa. You see her? Not just as a goddess of strategic warfare, but also as the patron of wisdom, handicrafts, and civilized life. Unlike her half-brother Ares, who revels in the chaos and bloodshed of battle, Athena is the goddess of justified warfare, using cunning and strategy. She taught humanity arts like weaving, pottery, and shipbuilding, and she provided wise counsel to heroes like Odysseus and Heracles. Her wisdom is often portrayed as sharp and insightful, always a step ahead. She's the ultimate intellectual warrior, the one you want on your team when you're playing cosmic chess. Hermes, the swift messenger god, is another fascinating character. Born to Zeus and Maia, a nymph, he was a mischievous trickster even as a babe. On the very day he was born, he slipped out of his cradle and stole 50 cattle from his half-brother Apollo's sacred herd. You chuckle at the audacity of a newborn pulling off such a heist. When Apollo, furious, confronted the infant, Hermes denied it with a straight face. He then, with incredible speed and ingenuity, invented the lyre from a tortoise shell and gut strings and played such beautiful music that Apollo, captivated, forgave him and even traded the cattle for the instrument. This charming act established Hermes as the god of eloquence, trade, thievery, and travel. He guides souls to the underworld, delivers messages between gods and mortals, and is the patron of athletes, merchants, and even thieves. He's the ultimate multitasker, the divine equivalent of a delivery service, travel agent, and con artist all rolled into one, always with a mischievous glint in his eye. But Perseus had divine help. Athena, always a fan of clever heroes, provided him with a highly polished bronze shield, so he could see Medusa's reflection without looking directly at her. Hermes gave him winged sandals for swift travel and a side-light sword, made of adamantine, sharp enough to sever Medusa's neck. Cant from the helpful nymphs of the north, he received Hades' helm of darkness, making him invisible, and a magical bag, Achilles, to safely carry Medusa's head. I could feel the incredible weight of these gifts, the gravity of his task. You follow Perseus as he flies to the remote land of the Gorgons. He finds Medusa sleeping, her snake hair writhing softly. Using Athena's shield as a mirror, he carefully approaches, averting his eyes from her terrible face. With one swift, horrifying stroke of Hermes' sword, he severs her head. You hear the sickening thud, and from Medusa's neck, two extraordinary beings spring forth. Pegasus, a winged horse, and Chrysaor, a giant wielding a golden sword. They are her children, fathered by Poseidon. What a family tree, right? Pegasus, especially, would become one of the most iconic creatures in Greek mythology, a symbol of poetic inspiration and untamed freedom. With Medusa's head safely tucked away in his magic bag, Perseus flew away. On his return journey, he spotted a beautiful princess chained to a rock by the sea. This was Andromeda, daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia of Ethiopia. Her mother had boasted that she was more beautiful than the Nereid sea nymphs, incurring the wrath of Poseidon, who sent a sea monster, Cetus, to ravage the coast. The only way to appease him was to sacrifice Andromeda to the monster. You feel the impending doom, the raw injustice of her fate. Perseus, arriving just in time, fell instantly in love with her. He made a deal with her parents. He would slay the monster if he could marry Andromeda. They readily agreed. You watch as Perseus battles the terrifying sea beast, using his winged sandals to fly around it, finally turning it to stone with Medusa's head, or, in some versions, plunging his sword into its vitals. He rescued Andromeda, married her, and brought her back to Seriphos. There he turned Pylades and his followers. Two stone rescued his mother and eventually returned to Cagus, fulfilling the prophecy of killing his grandfather, Chryseus, accidentally with a discus throw at a funeral games, because fate always finds a way. Perseus became a great king, progenitor of many royal lines, and eventually, after his death, was placed among the stars as a constellation. A hero's journey, indeed, full of monsters, maidens, and accidental regicide. Another hero of this early age, though perhaps less fortunate in his end, was Bellerophon. His story also involves Pegasus. You see Bellerophon, a prince exiled for accidental murder, arriving at the court of King Proetus. Cetus' wife, Antea, falsely accused Bellerophon of trying to seduce her, leading Proetus to send him to his father-in-law, King Iobates of Lycia, with a sealed letter requesting Bellerophon's death. Unwilling to directly kill a guest, instead sent Bellerophon on increasingly suicidal missions. His most famous task was to kill the Chimera, a terrifying, fire-breathing monster with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and a serpent's tail. You feel the heat radiating off this creature. Hear its guttural roars. Bellerophon, aided by Athena, managed to tame Pegasus, either by finding him at a spring or receiving him from Poseidon. You imagine the breathtaking sight of a mortal soaring through the sky on a winged horse. From Pegasus's back, Bellerophon attacked the Chimera, eventually killing it by thrusting a lead-tipped spear into its mouth, which melted and suffocated the beast. He accomplished many other impossible tasks, but his success eventually led to hubris. He tried to fly Pegasus to Olympus, believing he deserved a place among the gods. Zeus, enraged by his mortal arrogance, sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus, throwing Bellerophon from his back. He fell to earth, crippled and blind, wandering alone until his death. A stark reminder that mortals, no matter how heroic, should not challenge divine boundaries. These early heroic tales often serve as cautionary ones about hubris, that fatal flaw of excessive pride that challenges the gods. We've seen it with Bellerophon. Two other short, yet profoundly impactful, stories highlight this theme beautifully, involving mortals whose talent rivaled or appeared to rival the divine. First, there is Arachne, a mortal woman from Lydia, renowned for her extraordinary skill in weaving and embroidery. You see her nimble fingers, producing tapestries so intricate and beautiful they seemed to shimmer with life. People would travel far and wide just to see her work, praising her as if she were a goddess. But Arachne, in her pride, declared that her skills surpassed even that of Athena, the goddess of crafts. You cringe, knowing this won't end well. Athena, ever protective of her domain, appeared to Arachne disguised as an old woman, offering her a chance to retract her boast. Arachne scoffed, challenging the goddess to a contest. Athena then revealed her true form, and the weaving contest began. Athena wove a tapestry depicting the gods in all their majesty, warning against mortals who dared challenge them. Arachne, undaunted, wove a tapestry depicting the gods' scandals and misdeeds, particularly Zeus's many deceptive seductions. Her work was technically flawless, undeniably beautiful, and infuriatingly disrespectful. Athena, unable to find a single flaw in Arachne's craftsmanship, was filled with rage at the insolence of the subject matter. She struck Arachne with her shuttle. Robbed by shame and despair, Arachne tried to hang herself, but Athena, perhaps with a touch of pity, or simply wanting a more ironic punishment, saved her, transforming her into a spider. "Live on, arrogant one," Athena declared, "and weave forever. But from now on, you and all your descendants will hang and spin. So, the next time you see a spider meticulously spinning its web, remember Arachne, a brilliant artist whose pride turned her into a creature of tireless, silent craft." It's a quirky, slightly creepy origin story for one of nature's most ubiquitous engineers. Then there's the tale of King Midas, a man who, despite his royal status, learned a harsh lesson about the perils of greed. He was known for his hospitality, and one day he found the satyr Silenus, the drunken companion of Dionysus, passed out in his rose garden. Midas treated Silenus kindly for 10 days before returning him to Dionysus. Grateful, Dionysus offered Midas any wish he desired. You feel the hopeful anticipation, the limitless possibilities of a divine wish. Midas, without hesitation, wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. Initially, Midas was ecstatic. You imagine him running around his palace, turning roses, tables, and even pebbles into shimmering gold. He was unimaginably rich, but his joy quickly turned to horror. When he tried to eat, his food turned to gold. When he tried to drink, his wine became liquid gold. Even his beloved daughter, in some versions of the myth, turned into a golden statue when he embraced her. You feel his despair, the cold, heavy weight of his wish. He begged Dionysus to take back the gift. Dionysus, amused by the lesson, instructed Midas to wash in the river Pactolus. You see him plunging his hands into the river, watching as the golden touch flowed out of him and into the river, which is why, to this day, the Pactolus River in Lydia was said to contain gold dust. But Midas wasn't quite done with his lessons. He later unwisely declared that the music of Pan, the rustic god of the wild, was superior to that of Apollo, the god of music. Apollo, in his predictable fury at being insulted by a mere mortal, cursed Midas by turning his ears into those of a donkey. Imagine the shame, the indignity. Midas tried to hide his ears under a turban, but his barber discovered the secret, unable to keep it. But fearing Midas's wrath, the barber whispered the secret into a hole in the ground. Reeds grew from that spot, and whenever the wind blew, they whispered, "King Midas has ass's ears." King Midas has ass's ears. It's a delightful, gossipy little myth that reminds us that secrets, especially embarrassing ones, have a way of getting out. Not all divine interactions were punitive, however. Sping showcased the more benevolent, or at least less destructive, aspects of the gods. Take Pygmalion, a talented sculptor from Cyprus. Disgusted by the immoral women of his city, he vowed to remain unmarried. Instead, He channeled all his artistic passion into carving a statue of a woman from ivory, so perfect and beautiful that he fell deeply in love with his own creation. You feel the obsessive nature of his love, the yearning for life in his art. He dressed her, brought her gifts, and whispered endearments to her, as if she were alive. During the festival of Aphrodite, Pygmalion prayed earnestly to the goddess of love, asking that he might find a woman just like his ivory statue. He didn't dare ask for the statue itself to come to life, but Aphrodite, touched by his genuine devotion and pure love, understood his unspoken wish. When Pygmalion returned home and kissed his beloved statue, he felt warmth, a softening of the ivory. You feel the magical shift, the subtle transition from cold stone to warm flesh. The statue came to life, and Pygmalion married his Galatea. This story, so often retold, is a testament to the power of art and love to transcend boundaries and to Aphrodite's capacity for granting wishes when true devotion is present. With the world now well populated by mortals and their unfortunate animal-eared kings and arachnid weavers, and a few early heroes having tested the waters of divine favor and fury, it was time for the first grand collective adventure of the Greek mythological world, the quest for the Golden Fleece undertaken by Jason and the Argonauts. This isn't just one hero, it's an ensemble cast of veritable Avengers of the ancient world. The story begins in Iolcus, where a wicked king named Peleus usurped the throne from his half-brother Aeson, Jason's father. An oracle warned Peleus to beware of a man with one sandal. Years later, Jason, a strapping young man, returned to Iolcus, having been raised in secret by the wise centaur Chiron. Yes, the same one who raised Dionysus, and later Achilles. Crossing a river, Jason lost one sandal, fulfilling the prophecy. You feel the tension in the air as Peleus recognizes the fateful sign. To get rid of Jason, Peleus demanded the impossible. Bring him the Golden Fleece, a magical fleece from a winged ram, located in the distant and dangerous land of Caucasus. Jason, undeterred, put out a call for heroes, and they answered. You imagine the legendary figures gathering. Heracles, yes, he was briefly an Argonaut before his own labors took over. Orpheus, the magical musician whose lyre could charm beasts and men. The winged brothers, Calais and Zeus, Peleus, Achilles' father. Nestor, the wise old advisor from the Trojan War, and many more. They set sail on the Argo, a magnificent ship built with the help of Athena, which even included a piece of magical timber from the talking oak of Dodona. You feel the salt spray on your face, hear the creak of the timbers as this legendary crew embarks on their epic voyage. Their journey was a series of perilous encounters. They had to navigate the Simplified, the clashing rocks, to massive cliffs that crashed together, crushing any ship that dared to pass. You hold your breath as the Argo narrowly escapes, aided by a dove sent by Hera. Jason had gained her favor by helping her cross a river while disguised as an old woman. They encountered the Harpies, foul bird women who tormented the blind prophet Phineas, stealing and defiling his food. The winged Argonauts, Zeus and Calais, drove them off. They visited strange islands, faced treacherous storms, and suffered losses along the way. It's basically the ancient world's version of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, but with more actual gods involved. Finally, they reached Caucasus, ruled by the cunning king, Odysseus, who was naturally unwilling to part with his prized golden fleece. Odysseus set Jason a series of impossible tasks: yoke fire-breathing bulls and plow a field. So, dragon's teeth, yes, those again. And then defeat the armed warriors who sprang from the earth. You feel the overwhelming challenge, the sheer impossibility of it for a mere mortal. But here, love, or perhaps obsession, intervened. Medea, King Ates's daughter, was a powerful sorceress and priestess of Hecate. Aphrodite, at Hera's request, made her fall madly in love with Jason. You witness Medea's internal struggle, her loyalty to her father, battling her overwhelming passion. She betrayed her family, giving Jason magical ointments to protect him from the fire-breathing bulls and advising him to throw a stone among the Spartoi, just like Cadmus, causing them to fight each other. Even after Jason completed these tasks, Thetis refused to give up the fleece. So Medea led Jason to the sacred grove where the golden fleece was guarded by a sleepless dragon. With her magic, Medea lulled the dragon to sleep, and Jason seized the fleece. You feel the immense triumph, the weight of the shimmering golden wool in his hands, but their escape was brutal. As they fled, Medea chopped up her own brother, Absudus, scattering his body parts in the sea to delay their pursuing father, knowing Thetis would stop to collect his son's remains. It's a chilling act, a glimpse into Medea's ruthless, dark power that will manifest far more terribly later. The journey back was fraught with more divine wrath and magical detours. When they finally returned to Iolcus, Jason presented the fleece to Peleus, but Peleus still refused to give up the throne. So Medea, eager to secure Jason's reign, tricked Peleus's daughters into dismembering and boiling their father, promising them she could restore him to youth with her magic. You feel the horror of the deed, the daughters' desperate hope, and Medea's chilling deception. Despite Medea's ruthless actions, the people of Iolcus were appalled and drove Jason and Medea into exile. Their story, however, doesn't end there. It continues with more betrayals, more magic, and more tragedy. Especially Medea's horrific revenge on Jason after he abandons her for another princess. But that too is a story for another time. The quest for the Golden Fleece, however, marks a significant milestone. The first great collaborative adventure, showcasing teamwork, magic, and the enduring power of ambition and forbidden love. Now, as we near the precipice of the greatest saga in Greek mythology, the Trojan War, we must first understand the deep generational curses that plagued some of the most powerful royal houses, setting the stage for the epic conflict. The house of Atreus, destined to produce Agamemnon and Menelaus, is particularly cursed, a family history so twisted it makes reality TV look like a pleasant picnic. The curse began with Tantalus, a son of Zeus, who was king of Cyprus. Tantalus was invited to feast with the gods on Olympus, a rare privilege, but he abused their hospitality in the most grotesque way imaginable. To test their omniscience, he cooked his own son, Pelops, and served him to the gods at a banquet. You feel the sickening horror of this act. Most of the gods recognized the horrifying dish and recoiled, but Demeter, still distraught over Persephone's abduction, accidentally ate Pelops' shoulder. Its gods, enraged by Tantalus's impiety, punished him eternally in the underworld. You see him standing in a pool of water with fruit trees hanging overhead, but whenever he reached for the fruit, the branches would recede, and whenever he bent to drink, the water would recede, leaving him perpetually tormented by unquenchable hunger and thirst. Thus, the word tantalize enters our vocabulary, a direct result of this horrific divine punishment. Pelops was miraculously restored to life by the gods, with Demeter's eaten shoulder replaced with one of ivory, crafted by Hephaestus. He became a great hero, but the curse followed his lineage. Pelops famously competed in a chariot race against King Ennomus of Pisa, who had a habit of killing suitors who couldn't beat him in a race. Pelops won, but only by bribing Ennomus's charioteer, Minotaur, to sabotage the king's chariot. Minotaur, however, expected a reward that Pelops refused to give, instead throwing him off a cliff to his death. As he fell, Minotaur cursed Pelops and his descendants. You feel the insidious spread of the curse, a dark stain on the family tree. This curse continued through Pelops' sons, Atreus and Thyestes, who were locked in a vicious rivalry for the throne of Mycenae. Their feud escalated into unspeakable acts of revenge, including Thyestes seducing Atreus' wife, and Atreus, in turn, inviting Thyestes to a banquet where he unknowingly ate the flesh of his own sons. You recoil at the sheer depravity, the unending cycle of violence and cannibalism. It's the kind of family reunion you definitely want to miss. This deeply dysfunctional and cursed lineage is critical because it leads directly to Agamemnon and Menelaus, sons of Atreus, the very kings who will lead the Greek forces against Troy. Their inherited destiny of violence and tragedy will loom large over the entire Trojan War saga. And now, dear listener, the stage is almost completely set for the greatest epic of all. The conflict that will define the heroic age and echo through the ages, the Trojan War. This wasn't just a squabble over land or power. It was a cosmic chain reaction, sparked by a single golden apple and the most beautiful woman in the world. It all began at a wedding, a divine wedding, no less. Peleus, a mortal king, married Thetis, a beautiful sea nymph. All the gods were invited, except for one, Eris, the goddess of discord. You feel the simmering resentment, the deliberate snub that always leads to trouble. Eris, naturally offended, decided to crash the party. She tossed a golden apple inscribed with the words "to the fairest" into the midst of the goddesses. You hear the sudden gasp, the immediate tension as the apple rolls across the floor. Immediately, three powerful goddesses laid claim to it. Hera, the queen of the gods. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. And Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Each believed she was the fairest. They couldn't agree, and none of the other gods dared to judge for fear of offending the other two. So, Zeus, being Zeus, cleverly, or perhaps cowardly, deferred the judgment to a mortal. He chose Paris, a prince of Troy, who was then living as a shepherd on Mount Ida, having been exiled due to a prophecy that he would cause the downfall of Troy. You sensed the irony. It's a cruel twist of fate as this seemingly insignificant shepherd is handed the destiny of empires. The goddesses appeared before Paris, each offering him a bribe for his vote. Hera promised him power and a vast kingdom. Athena offered him wisdom and victory in all battles. Aphrodite, however, offered him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. You see Paris, weighing his options, a young man faced with the ultimate choice. Predictably, he chose Aphrodite's bribe. He awarded the golden apple to her, instantly earning the eternal enmity of Hera and Athena, who would become fierce adversaries of Troy. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen, the queen of Sparta, wife of King Menelaus. Remember Leda and the swan? Helen was one of the two children born from Zeus's egg, making her divinely beautiful, but also deeply entangled in the affairs of the gods. Paris, now with Aphrodite's aid, traveled to Sparta. You watch as he is welcomed as a guest in Menelaus' palace. While Menelaus was away, Paris, aided by Aphrodite, seduced Helen and carried her off to Troy. Some versions say she went willingly, others that she was abducted. Either way, the consequences were cataclysmic. Menelaus, enraged by the abduction of his wife and the violation of hospitality, appealed to his brother, Agamemnon, the powerful king of Mycenae and the most influential Greek monarch. Agamemnon, bound by an ancient oath. All the prominent Greek heroes had sworn to protect Helen's marriage when they competed for her hand, agreed to lead a massive expedition to retrieve Helen and sack Troy. You feel the gathering storm, the mobilization of an entire civilization. Messengers were sent throughout Greece, summoning all the legendary heroes, the great warrior Achilles, the cunning Odysseus, the mighty Ajax, the wise Nestor, and countless others. Tana, they assembled a fleet of 1,000 ships, destined for the shores of Troy. The stage is now truly set. The gods are arrayed on opposing sides, driven by old grudges and new alliances. Heroes of immense power and flawed character are gathered, ready to clash in a war that will last 10 long years, defining heroism, tragedy, and the very concept of epic struggle for millennia. You are at the very cusp of the Iliad, the most famous war in all of mythology, a conflict born from a beauty contest and fueled by divine wrath and mortal pride. Sleep tight, dear listener, because the battle for Troy is about to begin, and it's going to be absolutely legendary. Battle for Troy is about to begin, and it's going to be absolutely legendary. The Greeks, a formidable coalition of heroes and kings, assembled their 1,000 ships at Aulis, a port in Boeotia. You feel the buzz of anticipation, the excitement of so many legendary figures gathered in one place. But as often happens when divine approval is needed, things immediately hit a snag. The winds wouldn't blow. Not a whisper, not a breeze. The fleet was becalmed, stranded, their sails hanging uselessly like sad, deflated balloons. Agamemnon, the High King, consulted the seer Calchas, who, let's be honest, usually brought bad news. Calchas revealed that the goddess Artemis was enraged. Why? 'Cause Agamemnon, being a bit of a pompous jerk, had offended her by boasting that he was a better hunter than she, or perhaps by killing a sacred stag in her grove. Divine pride. Again, always the trigger. The only way to appease Artemis and get the winds blowing was to sacrifice Agamemnon's own eldest daughter, Iphigenia. You feel a cold dread creep over you. What a choice, right? Your fleet, your reputation, or your child? Agamemnon, tragically, chose the fleet. He tricked Iphigenia into coming to Aulis by pretending she was to marry Achilles. You can almost see the wedding dress, the innocent joy, turning into pure horror as she realized her fate, as she was about to be sacrificed on the altar. However, Artemis, perhaps touched by her innocence or a last-minute change of heart, replaced Iphigenia with a dear and spirited, the girl away to become her priestess in Taurus. Historians still debate the precise details. Was she saved, or did she die? But for the Greeks on the shore, the wind stirred, and the fleet sailed. Agamemnon's choice, though, would haunt him and his family for generations, poisoning his homecoming. Speaking of Achilles, the greatest warrior of all, he almost didn't make it to Troy. A prophecy foretold that Troy could not fall without him, but also that if he went, he would die there. His mother, the sea nymph Thetis, desperate to save him, guised him as a girl and hid him among the daughters of King Lycomedes on the island of Skyros. You can almost see the awkwardness, the mighty warrior trying to play dress-up. But Odysseus, the most cunning of the Greeks, was dispatched to find him. Odysseus, ever resourceful, brought gifts for the princesses, jewels, fabrics, and, cunningly, a sword and shield. When a trumpet blared a false alarm of attack, all the girls scattered. But Achilles instinctively grabbed the weapons. Busted, he joined the expedition, accepting his grim destiny. The vast Greek armada finally reached the shores of Troy. You hear the creak of anchors, the splash of men wading ashore. The first Greek to step on Trojan soil was destined to die, a grim prophecy indeed. Protesilaus, a brave chieftain, jumped ashore first and was immediately killed by Hector, Troy's greatest champion. A harsh welcome, setting the tone for a brutal war. For 9 long years, the war settled into a stalemate. The Greeks besieged the mighty walls of Troy, but the Trojans, led by Hector and defended by their formidable fortifications, held firm. The war largely consisted of skirmishes, raids on neighboring cities for supplies and plunder, and occasional pitched battles on the plains outside the city. It wasn't exactly a non-stop action movie for those first 9 years. It's more like a very, very drawn-out military exercise with occasional moments of terrifying violence. You can imagine the boredom, the homesickness, the sheer exhaustion setting in for the warriors. But in the 10th year, things went from bad to utterly catastrophic for the Greeks, sparking the events that formed the core of Homer's Iliad. It all began, predictably, with Agamemnon and his insatiable greed. During a raid, he took Chryses' daughter of a priest of Apollo as his war prize. Her father, Chryses, offered a massive ransom, but Agamemnon rudely refused. You hear the old priest's desperate pleas, ignored by the arrogant king. Chryses prayed to Apollo, who, ever protective of his priests, unleashed a plague upon the Greek army. Arrows of pestilence rained down, invisible and deadly, causing widespread sickness and death. The Greeks were dying, their ranks thinning. Achilles, disgusted by Agamemnon's stubbornness, called an assembly. Calchas, protected by Achilles, finally revealed the cause of the plague. Agamemnon, furious at being exposed, begrudgingly agreed to return Chryses, but demanded Achilles' war prize, Briseis, in retaliation. You feel the tension, the sheer audacity of Agamemnon. Achilles, enraged by this blatant insult and usurpation of his honor, a critical concept in ancient Greek culture, called Tim, refused to fight. He packed up his myrmidons, his elite warriors, and retreated to his tent, vowing to remain out of battle until Agamemnon begged for his return. Fine, you can almost hear him huff. Let them see how they fare without me. And fare they did, very, very badly, with Achilles, the greatest warrior, sitting on the sidelines. The tide of battle swiftly turned in favor of the Trojans. The gods, as usual, chose sides and actively interfered. Hera and Athena, still fuming about Paris's judgment, sided with the Greeks. Aphrodite, Apollo, and Ares, who honestly just loved a good fight, generally supported the Trojans. You see Zeus, trying to maintain some semblance of neutrality, but often swayed by Thetis's pleas on behalf of her son, Achilles. The fighting grew desperate for the Greeks. Keta, Troy's champion, pushed them back towards their ships, threatening to burn their entire fleet. You hear the screams of the wounded, the clanging of bronze, the desperate pleas for help. Patroclus, Achilles' beloved companion and closest friend, could bear it no longer. He pleaded with Achilles to return to battle, or at least to let him wear Achilles' armor to rally the terrified Greeks. Achilles, still stubborn, but moved by Patroclus' anguish, agreed. But, with a strict warning, only drive the Trojans from the ships. Do not pursue them to the city walls. Patroclus, wearing Achilles' magnificent armor, plunged into the fray. Kata, you feel the surge of hope among the Greeks as they saw the familiar, terrifying figure of Achilles, or so they thought, return to battle. Patroclus fought with incredible fury, driving the Trojans back, killing many. But in his bloodlust, he forgot Achilles' warning. He pursued the Trojans all the way to the sea-on gates of Troy. There, he was wounded by Apollo, stunned by Euphorbus, and finally killed by Hector. You feel the gut-wrenching despair, the crushing blow of this loss. Hector, triumphant, stripped Achilles' armor from Patroclus' body. When the news reached Achilles, his grief was beyond measure. You feel his earth-shattering roar, a primal scream of sorrow and vengeance. He was utterly consumed by it, his anger at Agamemnon now dwarfed by his fury at Hector. His mother, Thetis, seeing his despair, went to Hephaestus, the divine smith, and begged him to forge new, magnificent armor for her son. You envisioned the crackling fires of the forge, the rhythmic clang of the hammer, as Hephaestus crafts the iconic shield, depicting the entire cosmos and scenes of human life, a poignant contrast to the bloodshed it would soon witness. Clad in his new, gleaming armor, Achilles rejoined the battle. He was a force of nature, a terrifying engine of destruction. He cut down Trojans mercilessly, seeking out Hector. You witnessed the two greatest warriors of their age finally meet on the battlefield. Hector, brave but mortal, stood his ground, though a brief moment of terror almost made him flee. Athena, disguised as his brother Deiphobus, tricked him into facing Achilles. They fought a brutal, desperate duel. Achilles, guided by Athena and fueled by rage, plunged his spear into Hector's neck, killing him. But Achilles' vengeance wasn't sated. In an act of unparalleled desecration, he tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it 3 times around the walls of Troy, in full view of his grieving parents, King Priam and Queen Hecuba. You feel the shock, the horror, the utter disrespect for the dead. Even the gods were disgusted by the success. Finally, old King Priam, risking everything, secretly entered the Greek camp, guided by Hermes. He knelt before Achilles, humbly begging for his son's body. You feel the raw emotion, the shared humanity, as Achilles, remembering his own aging father, was finally moved to pity. He returned Hector's body, allowing the Trojans to hold proper funeral rites for their champion. The Iliad ends here, with the funeral of Hector, suggesting that even in war, there is a place for human compassion and ritual. But the Trojan War, of course, was far from over. Even after Hector's death, the city of Troy still stood strong. Other heroes entered the fray. Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, brought her fierce warrior women to aid the Trojans, only to be slain by Achilles. Memnon, king of the Ethiopians and son of Eos, the goddess of dawn, also came to Troy's defense. A powerful warrior who nearly matched Achilles before being killed by him. Achilles, however, was not immortal, save for his heel. The only part of him, his mother Thetis, had failed to dip into the river Styx during his infancy. You remember that little dip, that single point of vulnerability? Paris, guided by Apollo, who harbored a long-standing grudge against the Greeks, shot an arrow that found its mark in Achilles' heel. You feel the disbelief, the sudden collapse of the invincible warrior. The greatest hero of the Greeks, brought down by a cowardly shot to a single weak point. A hero's tragic, almost ironic, end. After Achilles' death, a fierce dispute arose over who would inherit his divine armor. It came down to Odysseus, the cunning tactician, and Ajax, the mighty warrior. The Greeks awarded the armor to Odysseus, recognizing that brains often trumped brawn in the long run. Ajax, driven mad by humiliation and divine interference, likely from Athena, who favored Odysseus, slaughtered a flock of sheep, believing them to be the Greek leaders. When he came to his senses and realized his shameful delusion, he committed suicide by falling on his own sword, a tragic end for a proud, powerful warrior. With Troy still unconquered and their greatest heroes gone, the Greeks needed a new plan. And this is where Odysseus, the master of trickery, truly shone. He conceived of the ultimate stratagem, the Trojan horse. You picture the massive wooden horse being built, ostensibly as an offering to Athena, or perhaps as a gift from the Greeks, acknowledging their defeat and departure. Kala, craftsmanship, the hollow belly, the hidden compartment designed to hold a select group of elite Greek warriors. Kala is like the ancient world's most elaborate Trojan file. The Greeks feigned retreat, burning their camp and sailing their ships just out of sight, leaving behind only the giant wooden horse and one man. Sinon, a master of deception, allowed himself to be captured by the Trojans. He spun a elaborate tale, claiming he was a deserter, that the horse was an offering to Athena to ensure a safe voyage home, and that it was deliberately built too large to fit through Troy's gates, lest the Trojans bring it inside and gain divine favor for themselves. You feel his persuasive words, his seemingly genuine fear, as the Trojans debated what to do. Laocoon, a Trojan priest of Poseidon, was suspicious. "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts," he famously warned, thrusting his spear into the side of the horse, which hollowly echoed. He was on the verge of convincing his people, but then two giant sea serpents, sent by Poseidon, was angry at Laocoon for violating a sacred oath, or perhaps sent by Athena, who wished Troy to fall, rose from the sea and devoured Laocoon and his two sons. You feel the sudden, terrifying intervention, the chilling sign that convinced the Trojans that Laocoon's warning was impious and wrong. They believed the horse was sacred and brought it inside their impregnable walls. They celebrated their supposed victory, feasting and drinking deep into the night. As the city slept, drunk and unsuspecting, Sinon opened a secret latch on the horse. The Greek warriors, led by Odysseus, descended. You hear the soft thud of their landing, the stealthy movements in the darkness. They opened the city gates to the waiting Greek army, who had sailed back under the cover of night. The sack of Troy began. It was a night of unimaginable horror and brutality. The Greeks, after 10 years of struggle, unleashed their pent-up fury. You hear the screams, the clash of swords, the crackle of burning timbers. Priam, the aged king, was mercilessly slaughtered at the altar by Neoptolemus, Achilles' brutal son. Cassandra, a prophetess cursed by Apollo to foresee the future, but never be believed, desperately warned her people of the horse, but was ignored and then dragged from Athena's temple and raped by Ajax the Lesser, an act that deeply offended Athena and Poseidon. Hector's infant son, Astyanax, was cruelly thrown from the walls of Troy, a desperate act to ensure no male heir would live to avenge the city. Polyxena, Priam's daughter, was sacrificed at Achilles' tomb to appease his ghost. A final, chilling act of vengeance and appeasement. The city of Troy burned, reduced to ashes, its people enslaved or slaughtered. It was a complete and utter annihilation, a tragic end to a legendary city. The Trojan War was over, but the troubles for the Greeks were far from finished. The gods, particularly Athena and Poseidon, were enraged by the sacrilegious behavior of the Greeks during the sack of Troy, especially Ajax the Lesser's actions. You feel the lingering divine wrath, the sense of cosmic injustice seeking balance. Their homecomings, known as the Nostoi, were fraught with peril, divine vengeance, and personal tragedy. Agamemnon, the High King, returned to Mycenae only to be brutally murdered by his wife, Clytemnestra, and her lover, Odysseus, in revenge for the sacrifice of Iphigenia. You feel the chilling precision of the revenge, the fulfillment of that earlier curse. His story is a classic example of the cyclical nature of violence and the inescapable web of fate in Greek mythology. Menelaus and Helen, the very cause of the war, cued a long, circuitous journey home, wandering for years across Egypt and North Africa before finally reaching Sparta. Helen, surprisingly, seems to have been largely forgiven, returning to her role as queen. Perhaps due to Aphrodite's continued protection, or simply her irresistible charm. The most famous and arduous homecoming belonged to Odysseus, the cunning hero who devised the Trojan horse. His journey, chronicled in Homer's Odyssey, would take him 10 long years, facing monstrous cyclopes, seductive sirens, vengeful gods, and treacherous seas, all while his loyal wife, Penelope, waited patiently, weaving and unweaving, back home in Ithaca. His tale alone is an epic for another night, a testament to resilience, wit, and the enduring power of longing. So, the greatest war in Greek mythology concluded not with a grand triumph for the victors, but with scattering, suffering, and the promise of more tragedy for the returning heroes. The world had changed. The heroic age was drawing to a close, giving way to the age of men, albeit men still very much under the watchful and often meddlesome eyes of the Olympian gods. You've witnessed the rise and fall of cosmic powers, the birth of humanity, the founding of cities, and the epic clashes of heroes and gods. But the stories, dear listener, are far from over. The world is still teeming with monsters, quests, and prophecies waiting to unfold. The world is still teeming with monsters, quests, and prophecies waiting to unfold. The victorious Greeks, having razed Troy to its foundations, probably thought they were finally done with divine interference. Asterisk, spoilers, they were not. The journey home, the nostoi, a great Greek word for homecoming that sounds much more epic than commute, proved to be as perilous, if not more so, than the war itself for many. The gods, particularly Athena and Poseidon, remained deeply offended by the Greeks' impious behavior during the sack of Troy. Remember Ajax, the Lesser defiling Cassandra in Athena's temple? That kind of thing really ticks off an Olympian. So, for many, the seas churned with divine wrath. The winds blew them off course, and their once proud fleets were scattered or sunk. You've heard that Agamemnon met a grisly end at home, a fittingly dramatic continuation of the Atreus family curse. Menelaus and Helen, the original power couple, had their own meandering, decade-long cruise back to Sparta, probably arguing about directions the whole time. And then, of course, there was Odysseus, whose 10-year struggle to get back to Ithaca is the subject of an entire epic poem for a reason. You can just imagine him sending texts like ETA is, whenever Hades decides, I have suffered enough for that horse idea. His journey was the ultimate divine obstacle course, filled with cyclopes, sirens, vengeful sea gods, and sorceresses. It underscores that even winning a war does unguarantee a smooth ride home when UV annoyed the wrong immortals. But not everyone died or got lost at sea. Some, like the Trojan prince Aeneas, had a different destiny entirely. You see him, a powerful and pious warrior, fleeing the burning ruins of Troy, carrying his elderly father Anchises on his back and leading his young son Ascanius by the hand. He carried the Penates, the household gods of Troy, with him, a symbol of the civilization he hoped to found anew. He endured his own epic meandering journey, beset by storms, prophecies, and vengeful goddesses. Hera, still holding a grudge against all Trojans, made sure of that. He eventually sailed to Italy, where he was destined to found a new lineage that would, millennia later, culminate in the mighty Roman Empire. It's a fascinating bridge between Greek mythology and Roman history, a divine reboot of a fallen civilization. Historians and classicists still love to debate how much of Virgil's Aeneid was patriotic Roman propaganda and how much was a genuine continuation of existing Trojan legends. Either way, it's proof that not all losers stay losers. Now, let's talk about the most famous demigod of all. The one whose name is synonymous with strength and impossible tasks, Heracles. We mentioned his tumultuous birth, Hera's ceaseless persecution, and his infant feat of strangling snakes. Heracles grew, his immense strength and volatile temper were evident. He was a force of nature, but often a troubled one. It was a fit of divinely induced madness, courtesy of Hera, of course, that led him to kill his own wife Megra and their children. You feel the profound sorrow and horror of the act, the despair that would drive him. Overcome with grief and remorse, Heracles sought purification and advice from the oracle of Delphi. Pythia instructed him to serve King Eurystheus of Tyrants for 12 years and perform whatever labors Eurystheus commanded. This was a deliberate humiliation. Eurystheus was a weaker, less honorable man, and it was Hera's cosmic joke that Heracles, the true hero, should be subservient to him. You can almost hear Hera cackling on Olympus. These were the legendary 12 labors of Heracles, a series of seemingly impossible tasks designed to kill him. But instead, destined to cement his immortality and purify his soul. You watch as Heracles embarks on these monumental feats. 1. The Nemean lion, a monstrous lion with impenetrable hide. Heracles cornered it and strangled it with his bare hands, then skinned it, using its own claws, wearing its pelt as his impenetrable cloak. You feel the raw, animalistic struggle, the immense power of his grip. 2. The Lernaean hydra, a multi-headed serpent that grew 2 new heads for every one cut off. And one of its heads was immortal. Heracles, with the help of his nephew Elaus, who cauterized the stumps with a burning brand to prevent regrowth, managed to defeat it. The immortal head was buried under a rock, and Heracles dipped his arrows in the hydra's venomous blood, making them deadly. You feel the heat of the cauterizing flame, the slithering menace of the serpent. 3. The Cyrenian hind, a magnificent, swift deer with golden antlers and bronze hooves, sacred to Artemis. Heracles pursued it for a year across Greece, finally catching it without harming it, thus appeasing the goddess. You feel the relentless chase, the respect for the sacred. 4. The Erymanthian boar, a giant, terrifying boar that ravaged the countryside. Heracles famously cornered it in deep snow and carried it back alive to Eurystheus, who promptly hid in a large jar at the sight of it. You can almost hear Eurystheus's terrified squeak, a moment of comic relief. 5. The Aegean stables, a truly disgusting task. King Augeas had stables that hadn't been cleaned in 30 years, filled with thousands of cattle. Heracles diverted to rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, to flow through the stables, cleaning them in a single day. This labor was controversial because Odysseus later refused to pay Heracles as agreed, leading to a war. This is a classic example of working smarter, not harder, though the smell must have been something else. 6. The Stymphalian birds. Man-eating birds with bronze beaks and metallic feathers that could be shot like arrows. Athena provided Heracles with bronze castanets or a rattle to frighten them from their perch, allowing him to shoot them down with his poisoned arrows. You hear the deafening clang of the castanets, the whir of deadly feathers. 7. The Cretan bull, the very bull that carried Europa. Later driven mad by Poseidon, was ravaging Crete. Heracles wrestled it and brought it back alive to Eurystheus. Imagine trying to get a raging divine bull onto a boat. 8. The mares of Diomedes, man-eating horses belonging to King Diomedes of Thrace. Heracles captured them, sometimes after feeding them their own master, and brought them back. You feel the brutal irony, the wild savagery of the horses. 9. The girdle of Hippolyta. Hippolyta was the queen of the Amazons, a fierce tribe of warrior women. Heracles was tasked with obtaining her magical girdle, a gift from Ares. Hera, of course, meddled, sparking a battle. And Heracles ended up killing Hippolyta, though some versions say she gave it willingly before Hera's interference. It's always the queen, isn't it? 10. Asterisk, asterisk. The cattle of Geryon. Asterisk, asterisk. A monstrous three-bodied giant living on an island in the far west. Heracles sailed to his realm, killed Geryon, and drove his massive herd of red cattle all the way back to Greece, a journey fraught with challenges. You feel the vastness of the world, the sheer endurance required. 11. The apples of the Hesperides. Golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides, guarded by a 100-headed dragon. Laden, Heracles tricked Atlas the Titan, holding up the sky, remember him, into getting the apples for him, briefly taking Atlas's burden on his own shoulders, and then cleverly tricking Atlas into taking it back. You feel the immense weight of the heavens, the cleverness of the trickster. 12. Cerberus. The final and most terrifying labor, bringing Cerberus, a three-headed dog guarding the entrance to the underworld, back to Eurystheus. Heracles descended into Hades, wrestled Cerberus barehanded or with his lion skin for protection, and dragged the snarling beast to the surface. You feel the chill of the underworld, the primal fear of the guardian of the dead. It's like the ultimate bring your pet to work day, but for a king who will probably faint on sight. After his labors, Heracles was truly purified and revered, continued to have countless adventures, freeing Prometheus from his eternal torment, another testament to his strength and compassion, though it happens much later in his life, and fathering numerous children. He eventually achieved apotheosis, ascending to Olympus as a god after his death, becoming the only mortal hero to do so. His story embodies the triumph of strength and endurance over suffering, a true rags to riches or mortal to God's hell. While Heracles was traversing the world, other heroes were making their mark. Let's head back to Crete, home of King Minos, Europa's son and a powerful ruler. Minos, you recall, was conceived from Zeus's encounter with Europa as a bull. Later became a dominant figure in the Aegean, ruling his vast sea empire from his labyrinthine palace at Naissus. King Minos had a problem. His wife Proserpine, in a rather bizarre twist of fate and divine punishment from Poseidon, developed an unnatural passion for a beautiful white bull. The same bull, in fact, that Heracles later captured as part of his labors. Poseidon, angry that Minos had not sacrificed this particular bull to him, caused this unnatural desire. Kecha, with the help of the brilliant craftsman Daedalus, constructed a hollow wooden cow, climbed inside, and, well, the result was the Minotaur. You feel the unsettling strangeness of this birth, the unnatural hybrid. The Minotaur was a monstrous creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, a fierce and insatiable beast. Minos, ashamed and horrified, commissioned Daedalus to build an elaborate labyrinth, a complex maze from which escape was impossible, to house the Minotaur. You can almost feel the disorienting turns, the dead ends, the echoing growls of the monster within. The Minotaur demanded a terrible tribute. After Minos' son, Androgeus, was killed in Athens, in revenge for winning the Panathenaic Games, or by a monster sent by Minos himself, depending on the version. Athens was forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women to Crete every 9 years as sacrificial food for the Minotaur. You feel the grim despair of the Athenians, the terror of the families whose children were chosen. Into this grim situation stepped Theseus, the greatest hero of Athens, son of King Aegis, though his true father was Poseidon. It's classic Zeus fashion, but with water instead of gold. Theseus grew up in secrecy, tasked with retrieving his father's sword and sandals from beneath a massive rock. When he came of age, you feel the anticipation as he lifts the boulder, discovering his destiny. He chose to travel to Athens by land, a perilous route designed to prove his heroism by overcoming several notorious bandits and monsters along the way. He killed Procrustes, the stretcher, who forced travelers to fit his bed by stretching or cutting off their limbs, a truly gruesome tidbit. That's where the term Procrustean bed comes from. He slew the Minotaur of Marathon. He lifted a giant sow. He was basically a one-man cleanup crew for ancient Greece's highway system. Upon reaching Athens, he quickly established himself. When the time came for the 3rd tribute to Crete, Theseus volunteered to go, determined to slay the Minotaur and end the Athenian suffering. You see him, brave and resolute, sailing with the doomed youths. Upon arrival in Crete, he captivated Ariadne, Minos' daughter. Like Medea, she fell in love with the hero and betrayed her family to help him. She gave him a ball of thread or string and a sword, advising him to tie one end of the thread at the labyrinth's entrance and unwind it as he went, so he could find his way back out. You feel the ingenious simplicity of the plan. Theseus entered the labyrinth, navigated its twisting passages using Ariadne's thread, found the Minotaur, and killed it with the sword. You hear the final bellow of the beast, the triumphant silence. He then led the trapped youths out of the maze. As they fled Crete, Theseus abandoned Ariadne on the island of Naxos, a rather unheroic move, often attributed to Dionysus intervening and claiming Ariadne for himself. Or simply Theseus's callousness. She would eventually become Dionysus's divine wife, a happy ending for her, at least. However, Theseus, in his haste or sorrow, forgot to change the black sails of his ship to white, a prearranged signal to his father Aegeus that he had succeeded. King Aegis, waiting anxiously on a cliff, saw the black sails and, believing his son was dead, threw himself into the sea, which was thereafter named the Aegean Sea. Another tragic twist of fate. And another etymological tidbit that explains the world around you. Theseus became king of Athens, a celebrated hero, though his later life was also marked by misadventures and betrayals. Now, let's turn to the deeply, deeply cursed city of Thebes. Remember Cadmus, the guy who planted dragon's teeth and married Harmonia, receiving a cursed necklace? That curse ensured that Thebes would be a magnet for tragedy, and few stories exemplify this more than that of Oedipus. Oedipus's story began with King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes. They received a terrifying prophecy from the oracle of Delphi. Their son would kill his father and marry his mother. You feel the chill of dread, the power of a fate seemingly inescapable. To avert this horror, Laius and Jocasta pierced the baby's ankles with a pin, giving him the name Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, and gave him to a shepherd to abandon on Mount Cithaeron. The shepherd, however, took pity on the infant and gave him to another shepherd, who, in turn, gave him to King Polybus and Queen Merope of Corinth, who raised him as their own. Oedipus grew up as a prince of Corinth, unaware of his true parentage. But one day, at a feast, a drunken guest taunted him about being adopted. Disturbed, Oedipus went to Delphi himself, only to receive the same dreadful prophecy. He would kill his father and marry his mother, believing Polybus and Merope were his true parents, and determined to avoid this horrific fate, Oedipus vowed never to return to Corinth. He instead headed towards Thebes, choosing a different path to escape his destiny. Along the way, at a narrow crossroads, he encountered an old man and his retinue. An argument broke out over who had the right of way. You feel the escalating tension, the fatal pride. Oedipus, in a fit of rage, killed the old man and most of his companions. Unbeknownst to him, the old man was King Laius, his biological father. The first part of the prophecy had been unwittingly fulfilled. Oedipus continued his journey to Thebes, only to find the city in turmoil. A monstrous creature, the Sphinx, was terrorizing the land. She had the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the head of a woman. She posed a riddle to all travelers, devouring anyone who failed to answer correctly. If you feel the intellectual challenge, the chilling stakes, what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? She would ask. Thebes was desperate. King Laius was missing, because Oedipus had just killed him, and the city was held hostage by the Sphinx. The new regent, Creon Jocasta's brother, promised the throne of Thebes, in the hand of the widowed queen Jocasta, to anyone who could solve the Sphinx's riddle. Oedipus, ever intelligent and bold, accepted the challenge. He correctly answered, "Man who crawls as a baby, walks upright as an adult, and uses a cane in old age." You feel the intellectual triumph, the rush of victory. Defeated, the Sphinx threw herself from a rock and died. Thebes rejoiced. Oedipus was hailed as a hero, and he married Queen Jocasta, his biological mother. The second part of the prophecy, the most horrifying part, was fulfilled. For years, Oedipus ruled Thebes justly and wisely. They had 4 children, 2 sons, Eteocles and Polynices, and 2 daughters, Antigone and Ismene. You see them, a seemingly happy family, blissfully unaware of the cosmic horror of their origins. But then, a terrible plague struck Thebes. Crops failed, cattle died, and people perished. The city was suffering immensely. Oedipus, as king, sent Creon to Delphi to discover the cause of the plague. The oracle revealed that the plague was divine punishment for the unavenged murder of King Laius, and that the murderer was living in Thebes. Oedipus, determined to cleanse the city, launched a furious investigation, vowing to find the killer and banish him. You feel the mounting dread, the sense of inevitable exposure. He consulted the blind prophet Tiresias, a truly fascinating figure in Greek myth, who had lived as both a man and a woman and seen all. Tiresias initially refused to speak, knowing the awful truth. But Oedipus, arrogant in his pursuit of justice, pressed him, even accusing Tiresias of being part of the murder. Finally, Tiresias, provoked, revealed the shocking truth. "You are the murderer you seek." Oedipus, enraged, refused to believe him, dismissing it as a conspiracy. But as more clues emerged, a sole survivor of Laius's retinue, a shepherd who had given away the baby, the pieces slowly clicked into place. Jocasta, realizing the horror before Oedipus did, desperately tried to dissuade him from discovering the full truth, but it was too late. When Oedipus finally learned that he had killed his father and married his mother, the weight of his fate crashed down on him. Jocasta, unable to bear the shame and horror, hanged herself. Oedipus, discovering her body, took the golden pans from her gown and blinded himself, gouging out his own eyes. "I will not look upon the children I have begotten, nor the parents I have slain," he cried. You feel the raw, visceral pain, the ultimate self-punishment. He then wandered the earth as a blind exile, accompanied by his loyal daughter Antigone, a desolate figure, a testament to the tragic power of fate. The curse of Cadmus, the curse of Pelops, found its new, horrifying expression. The house of Thebes, however, wasn't done with its drama. After Oedipus's exile, his two sons, Eteocles and Polynices, agreed to rule Thebes in alternating years. But Eteocles, after his first year, refused to give up the throne. Dionysus, enraged, gathered an army, along with 6 other chieftains, Ks, and launched the 7 against Thebes expedition, attacking his own city. You feel the bitter civil war, the internecine conflict, K. In the climactic battle, the two brothers met in single combat and killed each other, K. The prophecy, the curses, the endless cycle of violence, all played out on the blood-soaked plains of Thebes. Antigone, defying Creon's edict, buried her brother Polynices, leading to her own tragic death. Yet another chapter in the endless misery of the royal house. These are the kinds of stories that underpin so much of Greek thought. The overwhelming power of fate, the consequences of hubris, the cyclical nature of revenge and justice, and the constant, often devastating interference of the gods. You see humanity, for all its cleverness and strength, often caught in a web spun by forces far beyond its control. The myths are not just fantastical tales, okay? They are profound explorations of the human condition, our relationship with the divine, okay? And the often unforeseen consequences of our choices. The universe, though settled in its Olympian hierarchy, remains a tumultuous place. Gods still fall in love with mortals, inspire heroes, torment villains, and sometimes, stews for the sheer cosmic drama of it, transform themselves into animals or gold showers. The landscapes of Greece are dotted with the echoes of their passions and their wrath. From the sun-baked plains of Argos to the windswept peaks of Olympus, every rock and river seems to whisper a story. And this, dear listener, is just scratching the surface of the thousands upon thousands of tales that make up the rich, vibrant tapestry of Greek mythology. There are still many heroes to be born, more monsters to be slain, and countless more divine shenanigans to unfold. So, rest easy, for the story continues. And trust me, it gets even wilder from here. The world is still teeming with monsters, quests, and prophecies waiting to unfold. For the Greeks who had just survived a decade of brutal warfare, the idea of home shimmered like a mirage in the desert sun, tantalizingly close, yet often impossibly far. Their nostoi, their homecomings, became epics in themselves, each a unique testament to divine caprice, mortal endurance, and the often terrible cost of victory. While Agamemnon was busy being murdered in his bath, a truly tragic, yet from Hera's perspective, entirely justified post-war comeuppance, and Menelaus and Helen were off on their extended Mediterranean cruise last penance, tour one hero's journey transcended all others in its sheer mind-bending complexity. Odysseus of Ithaca. You know him as the cunning architect of the Trojan horse, the brains behind the brawn. Well, his 10-year odyssey back to his rocky little island home makes a cross-country road trip with a broken GPS and 3 squabbling toddlers look like a walk in the park. His journey wasn't just physical, it was a cosmic gauntlet, a trial by divine fire and monstrous teeth. His first stop, a seemingly simple raid on the Chicanes, quickly went awry when his men, flushed with victory and plunder, became greedy and complacent. Coup felt the immediate shift from strategic triumph to chaotic melee as the Cronus rallied and drove them back to their ships, suffering heavy losses. It was a harsh, early lesson in the dangers of undisciplined victory, and a stark reminder that even the savviest warrior couldn't control reckless subordinates. Then came the land of the lotus eaters. You imagine the gentle, languid air, the sweet, intoxicating scent of the lotus fruit. It wasn't a battle, but a more insidious threat, forgetfulness. Anyone who ate the lotus lost all desire to return home, drifting into a blissful, apathetic stupor. You might think, sounds a bit like that couch lock feeling after too much Netflix. But for these hardy sailors, it was the ultimate trap, severing them from their purpose and identity. Odysseus, ever the pragmatic leader, had to physically drag his weeping men back to the ship, binding them to the benches to break the enchantment. But the true horror began in the land of the Cyclopes. You smelled the pungent odor of sheep and unwashed giant in the air, the damp coolness of a cavernous dwelling. Odysseus and his scouting party stumbled upon the cave of Polyphemus, a colossal, one-eyed giant, son of Poseidon, who was less friendly shepherd and more man-eating beast. He trapped them in his cave, blocking the entrance with an impossibly large boulder, and proceeded to devour 2 of Odysseus's men for dinner, then 2 more for breakfast the next day. You feel the absolute terror, the sickening crunch of bone. Odysseus, ever quick-witted, concocted a daring plan. He offered Polyphemus strong wine, a gift from Apollo's priest, until the Cyclops was roaring drunk. You hear the deep, booming laughter, then the heavy snores. When Polyphemus asked his name, Odysseus replied, "My name is Nobody," a classic. Then, with his remaining men, Odysseus plunged a sharpened, burning stake into Polyphemus's single eye. You wince at the horrific, sizzling sound, the giant's ear-splitting scream of agony echoing through the cave. Blinded, Polyphemus roared for help. When other Cyclopes arrived and asked who was hurting him, he bellowed, "Nobody is hurting me." His giant neighbors, understandably, assumed he was just having a bad dream and left him alone. It's a brilliant, simple trick that still makes you smile. As a blind, enraged Polyphemus desperately tried to feel his way around the cave, Odysseus and his men clung to the bellies of the Cyclops' sheep, escaping when the giant let his flock out to graze. They managed to scramble back to their ship, but Odysseus, in a moment of fatal hubris, couldn't resist shouting his true name back to the blinded monster. "Tell them it was Odysseus, son of Laertes, sacker of cities, who put out your eye." "Bad move, buddy." Key, Polyphemus, now knowing his tormentor's name, prayed to his father, Poseidon, to curse Odysseus' journey home. Poseidon, being Poseidon, took that prayer very seriously. This single act of pride would fuel years of divine wrath against Odysseus, turning his homeward voyage into an endless nightmare. Historians and literary critics endlessly dissect this moment, debating whether Odysseus' boast was a necessary assertion of identity or a catastrophic display of fatal flaw. The sea god's fury began almost immediately. Next, Odysseus reached the floating island of Ialia, home of Elus, the benevolent keeper of the winds. Elus, taking pity on the weary travelers, gifted Odysseus a bag containing all the storm winds, leaving only the west wind free to guide them home. You imagine the immense power contained within that simple leather bag. Odysseus, exhausted, tied it to his mast and fell asleep, finally seeing the faint shores of Ithaca. But his greedy, suspicious crew, believing the bag contained gold that Odysseus was hoarding, secretly opened it. All the furious winds burst forth, whipping them away from home, back to Ialia. Ialus, disgusted by their folly, refused to help them again. You can almost hear him sighing, "Some mortals just don't learn." Their next stop was the land of the Lastrygonians, a race of colossal, cannibalistic giants who lived by a deep-harbored cove. Odysseus, with a terrible sense of foreboding, anchored his ship outside the harbor, but his entire fleet sailed inside. You feel the sudden, terrifying realization as the Lastrygonians emerged, squeezing down massive boulders from the cliffs, crushing ships and men like tin cans. Only Odysseus' ship, the one anchored outside, managed to escape the slaughter, speeding away, leaving a horrific scene of destruction behind. From the frying pan into the magical fire, they sailed to Ia, the island of Circe, a beautiful and powerful sorceress. She welcomed some of Odysseus' men, but quickly transformed them into swine, their human minds trapped in pig bodies, rooting around in the mud. You feel the chilling transformation, the utter indignity of it. Odysseus, aided by the god Hermes, who gave him a magical herb called moly to counter Circe's spells, confronted the sorceress. He resisted her magic, drew his sword, and forced her to return his men to their human forms. He ended up staying with her for a whole year, feasting and enjoying her hospitality, a classic example of divine intervention turned into extended vacation. Historians often point out the contrast between Circe, the powerful witch, and Calypso, the tempting goddess, both representing dangers to the hero's return, but with different forms of captivity. Circe eventually advised Odysseus to descend into the underworld, the realm of Hades, to consult the blind prophet Tiresias about his homecoming. You feel the profound chill as he sails to the edge of the world, performs the necessary rituals, sacrificing a black ram in a way, their blood filling a trench, and calls forth the spirits of the dead. This Nikia, or journey to the land of the dead, is a pivotal moment in the Odyssey, and provides us with one of the most vivid ancient Greek descriptions of the afterlife. You witness the shades of the dead swirling around him, hungry for the blood that would grant them temporary voice. He speaks to Tiresias, who foretells his future struggles, including the temptation of Helios's cattle. He sees his own mother, Anticlea, who died of grief during his long absence. He confronts the lingering sorrow of Achilles, who laments, "I would rather be a slave on earth for another man than rule over all the breathless dead." Talk about a depressing afterlife review. He encounters the silent, unforgiving shade of Ajax, still enraged over the armored dispute. He sees the eternally tormented Sisyphus, forever rolling his boulder uphill, Tantalus, forever parched and hungry, and others receiving their grim, unending punishments. It's a tour de force of ancient Greek eschatology, a truly gloomy look at the final destination for most souls, and a stark contrast to the lively, if tumultuous, world of the Olympians. Armed with Tiresias' prophecies, Odysseus returned to Circe's island to plan the remainder of his journey. She warned him of two more insurmountable dangers: the sirens and the twin monsters, Scylla and Charybdis. The sirens were beautiful, winged women whose enchanting songs lured sailors to their deaths on rocky shores. You hear the irresistible melody, subtly weaving into your mind, promising knowledge and bliss, knowing it's a trap. Odysseus, ever resourceful, followed Circe's advice. He had his men plug their ears with beeswax, and then ordered them to tie him to the mast, strictly forbidding them from untying him, no matter how much he begged. You feel his desperation, his agonizing struggle as he strained against the ropes, drawn by the beautiful, deadly voices, knowing that only by witnessing the danger could he truly overcome it. It's a fascinating psychological test, pitting curiosity against survival. Next, they faced a choice between Scylla, a six-headed monster would snatch sailors from the ship, and Charybdis, a monstrous whirlpool that would swallow entire ships. You feel the impossible dilemma, the no-win situation. Odysseus chose to sail closer to Scylla, knowing he would lose 6 men, but hoping to save the rest of his ship. You hear the screams, the sickening crunch as Scylla's head snatches men, a brutal, unavoidable sacrifice. Their final, catastrophic mistake came when they landed on the island of Uranus, sacred to Helios, the sun god, home to his sacred, immortal cattle. Despite Odysseus' dire warnings from both Tiresias and Circe, his starving crew, while he slept, succumbed to temptation and slaughtered some of the cattle for food. You feel the immediate sense of doom, the chilling certainty of divine retribution. Helios, enraged by the desecration, demanded vengeance from Zeus. Zeus, sympathetic to Helios, struck Odysseus' ship with a lightning bolt, destroying it and drowning all his remaining men. Odysseus, the lone survivor, clung to a piece of wreckage, eventually drifting to the island of Ogygia. Here, he was found by Calypso, a beautiful nymph who fell deeply in love with him. She kept him captive for 7 long years, offering him immortality and eternal youth, if he would only stay and be her husband. You feel the seductive power of eternal bliss, the allure of giving up the struggle, also the deep, knowing homesickness, the unbreakable bond to his mortal life and his family. He yearned for Penelope, his wife, and his son, Telemachus. Finally, Athena, ever his champion, intervened with Zeus. Zeus sent Hermes to order Calypso to release Odysseus. Reluctantly, mournfully, she helped him build a raft, and he set sail again, alone. His raft was shattered by Poseidon's last burst of vengeance, but Odysseus, clinging to a spar, was washed ashore on the land of the Phaeacians, a hospitable, seafaring people favored by the gods. He was discovered by Nausicaa, the beautiful princess, who led him to her father, King Alcinous. Here, Odysseus was finally treated with honor and hospitality, recounting his incredible, terrifying tale. How you hear the awe in the Phaeacians' voices as he describes his odyssey, a living legend before their very eyes. They, in turn, provided him with a magnificent ship and crew, finally bringing him back to Ithaca. After 20 years away, 10 fighting at Troy, 10 sailing home, Odysseus arrived home, disguised as an old beggar, thanks to Athena. You feel the raw emotion of his return, the tension of not revealing himself. Only his old, dying dog, Argos, recognized him, wagged his tail weakly, and then passed away, a truly heartbreaking reunion. His faithful swineherd, Eumaeus, and his son, Telemachus, who was an infant when Odysseus left, slowly came to recognize him through subtle hints and divine signs. His palace, however, was overrun by over 100 arrogant suitors, all vying for the hand of his loyal wife, Penelope, in trying to usurp his throne. They feasted on his wealth, insulted his son, and plotted to kill Telemachus. Penelope, cunning like her husband, had strung them along for years, promising to choose a suitor after she finished weaving a shroud for Odysseus' father, Laertes, a shroud she secretly unwove every night. You admire her ingenuity, her unwavering loyalty. Finally, at Athena's prompting, Hera declared a contest. She would marry the man who could string Odysseus' great bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through the holes of 12 axe heads lined up in a row. You feel the collective gasp, the immense challenge. None of the suitors, for all their strength, could even string the mighty bow. Then, the old beggar asked for a turn. The suitors scoffed, but Telemachus, knowing his father's plan, insisted. Odysseus, still disguised, effortlessly strung his own bow. I sound like a swallow's cry, and shot the arrow through the axe heads with perfect accuracy. The thunder rolled, a sign from Zeus, and the disguise dropped. You feel the shock, the terror among the suitors as the old beggar transformed into the mighty king. What followed was a brutal, merciless slaughter. Odysseus, Telemachus, Eumaeus, and Philaudeus, the loyal cowherd, aided by Athena, cut down every single suitor in the hall. It was a bloody, visceral scene, the rightful king reclaiming his domain with overwhelming vengeance. The disloyal servants were also punished, adding another layer of grim justice. Finally, after the palace was cleansed of blood and bodies, Odysseus revealed himself to Penelope. She, cautious, after 2 decades of waiting and fearing a trick from the gods, tested him, asking about a secret only they knew, the unmovable olive tree that formed the foundation of their bed. When Odysseus accurately described it, she finally embraced him, her tears mingling with his own. You feel the overwhelming relief, the profound joy of their reunion, a testament to enduring love and loyalty. It's one of the few truly happy endings in Greek mythology that feels earned. Odysseus' story is a profound exploration of human resilience, wit, and the journey home, both physically and spiritually. He eventually lived out his days as king of Ithaca, though some later myths suggest he met his end in another strange encounter. Let's leave him in his well-deserved peace for now. The Now story largely brought the heroic age of the Trojan War to a close, but the gods, of course, were far from done meddling. New heroes would rise, new prophecies would be uttered, and the ever-churning drama of Olympus would continue to spill over into the mortal world, often in unexpected and truly bizarre ways. You've seen the great cycles of creation, conflict, and consequence. Now, brace yourself, because the world of myth, with all its chaotic beauty, is about to dive into individual tales of profound magic, tragic romance, and the sheer audacity of mortals challenging the divine. The world is still teeming with monsters, quests, and prophecies waiting to unfold. The victorious Greeks, having razed Troy to its foundations, probably thought they were finally done with divine interference. Asterisk, spoilers, they were not. The journey home, the nostoi, a great Greek word for homecoming that sounds much more epic than commute, proved to be as perilous, if not more so, than the war itself for many. The gods, particularly Athena and Poseidon, remained deeply offended by the Greeks' impious behavior during the sack of Troy. Remember Ajax the Lesser defiling Cassandra in Athena's temple? That kind of thing really ticks off an Olympian. So, for many, the seas churned with divine wrath. The winds blew them off course, and their once proud fleets were scattered or sunk. You've heard that Agamemnon met a grisly end at home, a fittingly dramatic continuation of the Atreus family curse. Menelaus and Helen, the original power couple, had their own meandering, decade-long cruise back to Sparta, probably arguing about directions the whole time. And then, of course, there was Odysseus, whose 10-year struggle to get back to Ithaca is the subject of an entire epic poem for a reason. You can just imagine him sending texts like, ETA is, whenever Hades decides I've suffered enough for that horse idea. His journey was the ultimate divine obstacle course, filled with cyclopes, sirens, vengeful sea gods, and sorceresses. It underscores that even winning a war does unguarantee a smooth ride home when you annoyed the wrong immortals. His first stop, a seemingly simple raid on the Cronus, quickly went awry when his men, flushed with victory and plunder, became greedy and complacent. You feel the immediate shift from strategic triumph to chaotic melee as the Ciconies rallied and drove them back to their ships, suffering heavy losses. It was a harsh, early lesson in the dangers of undisciplined victory, and a stark reminder that even the savviest warrior couldn't control reckless subordinates. Then came the land of the lotus eaters. You imagine the gentle, languid air, the sweet, intoxicating scent of the lotus fruit. It wasn't a battle, but a more insidious threat. Forgetfulness. Anyone who ate the lotus lost all desire to return home, drifting into a blissful, apathetic stupor. You might think, sounds a bit like that couch lock feeling after too much Netflix. But for these hardy sailors, it was the ultimate trap, severing them from their purpose and identity. Odysseus, ever the pragmatic leader, had to physically drag his weeping men back to the ship, binding them to the benches to break the enchantment. But the true horror began in the land of the Cyclopes. You smelled the pungent odor of sheep and unwashed giant in the air, the damp coolness of a cavernous dwelling. Odysseus and his scouting party stumbled upon the cave of Polyphemus, a colossal, one-eyed giant, son of Poseidon, who was less friendly shepherd and more man-eating beast. He trapped them in his cave, blocking the entrance with an impossibly large boulder, and proceeded to devour 2 of Odysseus's men for dinner, then 2 more for breakfast the next day. You feel the absolute terror, the sickening crunch of bone. Odysseus, ever quick-witted, concocted a daring plan. He offered Polyphemus strong wine, a gift from Apollo's priest, until the Cyclops was roaring drunk. You hear the deep, booming laughter, then the heavy snores. When Polyphemus asked his name, Odysseus replied, "My name is Nobody," a classic. Then, with his remaining men, Odysseus plunged a sharpened, burning stake into Polyphemus's single eye. You wince at the horrific, sizzling sound, the giant's ear-splitting scream of agony echoing through the cave. Blinded, Polyphemus roared for help. When other Cyclopes arrived and asked who was hurting him, he bellowed, "Nobody is hurting me." His giant neighbors, understandably, assumed he was just having a bad dream and left him alone. It's a brilliant, simple trick that still makes you smile. So blind, enraged Polyphemus desperately tried to feel his way around the cave. Odysseus and his men clung to the bellies of the Cyclops' sheep, escaping when the giant led his flock out to graze. They managed to scramble back to their ship, but Odysseus, in a moment of fatal hubris, couldn't resist shouting his true name back to the blinded monster. Tell them it was Odysseus, son of Laertes, sacker of cities, who put out your eye. Bad move, buddy. Polyphemus, now knowing his tormentor's name, prayed to his father, Poseidon, to curse Odysseus' journey home. And Poseidon, being Poseidon, took that prayer very seriously. This single act of pride would fuel years of divine wrath against Odysseus, turning his homeward voyage into an endless nightmare. Historians and literary critics endlessly dissect this moment. Katie, whether Odysseus' boast was a necessary assertion of identity or a catastrophic display of fatal flaw. The sea god's fury began almost immediately. Next, Odysseus reached the floating island of Aealia, home of Aeolus, the benevolent keeper of the winds. Calus, taking pity on the weary travelers, gifted Odysseus a bag containing all the storm winds, leaving only the west wind free to guide them home. You imagine the immense power contained within that simple leather bag. Odysseus, exhausted, tied it to his mast and fell asleep, finally seeing the faint shores of Ithaca. But his greedy, suspicious crew, believing the bag contained gold that Odysseus was hoarding, secretly opened it. All the furious winds burst forth, whipping them away from home, back to Aealia. Aeolus, disgusted by their folly, refused to help them again. You can almost hear him sighing, some mortals just don't learn. Their next stop was the land of the Lastrygonians, a race of colossal, cannibalistic giants who lived by a deep-harbored cove. Odysseus, with a terrible sense of foreboding, anchored his ship outside the harbor, but his entire fleet sailed inside. You feel the sudden, terrifying realization as the Lastrygonians emerged, raining down massive boulders from the cliffs, crushing ships and men like tin cans. Only Odysseus' ship, the one anchored outside, managed to escape the slaughter, speeding away, leaving a horrific scene of destruction behind. From the frying pan into the magical fire, they sailed to Ia, the island of Circe, a beautiful and powerful sorceress. She welcomed some of Odysseus' men, but quickly transformed them into swine. Their human minds, trapped in pig bodies, rooting around in the mud. You feel the chilling transformation, the utter indignity of it. Odysseus, aided by the god Hermes, who gave him a magical herb called moly to counter Circe's spells, confronted the sorceress. He resisted her magic, drew his sword, and forced her to return his men to their human forms. He ended up staying with her for a whole year, feasting and enjoying her hospitality, a classic example of divine intervention turned into extended vacation. Historians often point out the contrast between Circe, the powerful witch, and Calypso, the tempting goddess, both representing dangers to the hero's return, but with different forms of captivity. Circe eventually advised Odysseus to descend into the underworld, the realm of Hades, to consult the blind prophet Tiresias about his homecoming. You feel the profound chill as he sails to the edge of the world, performs the necessary rituals, sacrificing a black ram in a way, their blood filling a trench, and calls forth the spirits of the dead. This Nicaea, or journey to the land of the dead, is a pivotal moment in the Odyssey and provides us with one of the most vivid, ancient Greek descriptions of the afterlife. You witness the shades of the dead swirling around him, hungry for the blood that would grant them temporary voice. He speaks to Tiresias, who foretells his future struggles, including the temptation of Helios's cattle. He sees his own mother, Anticlea, who died of grief during his long absence. He confronts the lingering sorrow of Achilles, who laments, "I would rather be a slave on earth for another man than rule over all the breathless dead." Let's talk about a depressing afterlife review. This counters the silent, unforgiving shade of Ajax, still enraged over the armor dispute. He sees the eternally tormented Sisyphus forever rolling his boulder uphill, Tantalus forever parched and hungry, and others receiving their grim, unending punishments. It's a tour de force of ancient Greek eschatology, a truly gloomy look at the final destination for most souls, in a stark contrast to the lively, if tumultuous world of the Olympians. Armed with Isis' prophecies, Odysseus returned to Circe's island to plan the remainder of his journey. She warned him of two more insurmountable dangers, the sirens and the twin monsters, Scylla and Charybdis. The sirens were beautiful, winged women whose enchanting songs lured sailors to their deaths on rocky shores. You hear the irresistible melody, subtly weaving into your mind, promising knowledge and bliss, knowing it's a trap. Odysseus, ever resourceful, followed Circe's advice. He had his men plug their ears with beeswax, and then ordered them to tie him to the mast, strictly forbidding them from untying him, no matter how much he begged. You feel his desperation, his agonizing struggle as he strained against the ropes, drawn by the beautiful, deadly voices, knowing that only by witnessing the danger could he truly overcome it. It's a fascinating psychological test, pitting curiosity against survival. Next, they faced a choice between Scylla, a six-headed monster who would snatch sailors from the ship, and Charybdis, a monstrous whirlpool that would swallow entire ships. You feel the impossible dilemma, the no-win situation. Odysseus chose to sail closer to Scylla, knowing he would lose 6 men, but hoping to save the rest of his ship. You hear the screams, the sickening crunch as Scylla's heads snatch his men, a brutal, unavoidable sacrifice. Their final, catastrophic mistake came when they landed on the island of Thrinacia, sacred to Helios, the sun god, home to his sacred, immortal cattle. Despite Odysseus's dire warnings from both Tiresias and Circe's starving crew, while he slept, succumbed to temptation and slaughtered some of the cattle for food. You feel the immediate sense of doom, the chilling certainty of divine retribution. Helios, enraged by the desecration, demanded vengeance from Zeus. Zeus, sympathetic to Helios, struck Odysseus' ship with a lightning bolt, destroying it and drowning all his remaining men. Odysseus, the lone survivor, clung to a piece of wreckage, eventually drifting to the island of Ægina. Here, he was found by Calypso, a beautiful nymph who fell deeply in love with him. She kept him captive for 7 long years, offering him immortality and eternal youth if he would only stay and be her husband. You feel the seductive power of eternal bliss, the allure of giving up the struggle, but also the deep, knowing homesickness, the unbreakable bond to his mortal life and his family. He yearned for Penelope, his wife, and his son, Telemachus. Finally, Athena, ever his champion, intervened with Zeus. Zeus sent Hermes to order Calypso to release Odysseus. Reluctantly, mournfully, she helped him build a raft, and he set sail again, alone. His raft was shattered by Poseidon's last burst of vengeance, but Odysseus, clinging to a spar, was washed ashore on the land of the Phaeacians, a hospitable, seafaring people favored by the gods. He was discovered by Nausicaa, the beautiful princess, who led him to her father, King Alcinous. Here, Odysseus was finally treated with honor and hospitality, recounting his incredible, terrifying tale. You hear the awe in the Phaeacians' voices as he describes his odyssey, a living legend before their very eyes. They, in turn, provided him with a magnificent ship and crew, finally bringing him back to Ithaca. After 20 years away, 10 fighting at Troy, 10 sailing home, Odysseus arrived home, disguised as an old beggar, thanks to Athena. You feel the raw emotion of his return, the tension of not revealing himself. Only his old, dying dog, Argos, recognized him, wagged his tail weakly, and then passed away, a truly heartbreaking reunion. His faithful swineherd, Eumaeus, and his son, Telemachus, who was an infant when Odysseus left, slowly came to recognize him through subtle hints and divine signs. His palace, however, was overrun by over 100 arrogant suitors. all vying for the hand of his loyal wife, Penelope, in trying to usurp his throne. They feasted on his wealth, insulted his son, and plotted to kill Telemachus. Penelope, cunning like her husband, had strung them along for years, promising to choose a suitor after she finished weaving a shroud for Odysseus' father, Laertes, a shroud she secretly unwove every night. You admire her ingenuity, her unwavering loyalty. Finally, at Athena's prompting, Hera declared a contest. She would marry the man who could string Odysseus' great bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through the holes of 12 axe heads lined up in a row. You feel the collective gasp, the immense challenge. None of the suitors, for all their strength, could even string the mighty bow. Then, the old beggar asked for a turn. The suitors scoffed, but Telemachus, knowing his father's plan, insisted. Odysseus, still disguised, effortlessly strung his own bow. I sound like a swallow's cry, and shot the arrow through the axe heads with perfect accuracy. The thunder rolled, a sign from Zeus, and the disguise dropped. You feel the shock, the terror among the suitors as the old beggar transformed into the mighty king. What followed was a brutal, merciless slaughter. Odysseus, Telemachus, Eumaeus, and Philaudeus, the loyal cowherd, aided by Athena, cut down every single suitor in the hall. It was a bloody, visceral scene, the rightful king reclaiming his domain with overwhelming vengeance. The disloyal servants were also punished, adding another layer of grim justice. Finally, after the palace was cleansed of blood and bodies, Odysseus revealed himself to Penelope. She, cautious, after 2 decades of waiting and fearing a trick from the gods, tested him, asking about a secret only they knew: the unmovable olive tree that formed the foundation of their bed. When Odysseus accurately described it, she finally embraced him, her tears mingling with his own. You feel the overwhelming relief, the profound joy of their reunion, a testament to enduring love and loyalty. It's one of the few truly happy endings in Greek mythology that feels earned. Odysseus' story is a profound exploration of human resilience, wit, and the journey home, both physically and spiritually. He eventually lived out his days as king of Ithaca, though some later myths suggest he met his end in another strange encounter. Let's leave him in his well-deserved peace for now. The now story largely brought the heroic age of the Trojan War to a close, but the gods, of course, were far from done meddling. New heroes would rise, new prophecies would be uttered, and the ever-churning drama of Olympus would continue to spill over into the mortal world, often in unexpected and truly bizarre ways. You've seen the great cycles of creation, conflict, and consequence. So now, brace yourself, because the world of myth, with all its chaotic beauty, is about to dive into individual tales of profound magic, tragic romance, and the sheer audacity of mortals challenging the divine. Let's turn our attention to the sheer, unadulterated power of love, even in the face of death. The story of Orpheus, the legendary musician and poet, is one of the most beautiful and heart-wrenching. Orpheus, son of the muse Calliope, or sometimes Apollo, was gifted with unparalleled musical talent. You feel the ethereal beauty of his melodies, the way his lyre could charm wild beasts, soothe raging rivers, and even make stones weep. His music was pure magic, a force that could bend the very fabric of nature. He fell deeply in love with a beautiful dryad named Eurydice. You pictured them, entwined in a sun-dappled forest, their love as harmonious as his music. Their happiness, however, was tragically short-lived. One day, while fleeing from the advances of Aristeus, a minor deity, Eurydice was bitten by a venomous snake and died. You feel the sudden, crushing blow, the abrupt silence in Orpheus's world. His grief was profound, his music now a mournful lament that echoed through the groves and mountains. But Orpheus, unlike other mortals, refused to accept death's finality. Driven by an overwhelming love and an audacious hope, he decided to do the unthinkable. he would descend into the underworld itself to retrieve his beloved Eurydice. You feel the chilling bravery, the desperate determination. He entered the shadowy realm, his lyre still clutched in his hands. He passed by the dreaded three-headed dog, Cerberus, lulling him to sleep with his enchanting music. He charmed Charon, the ferryman of the dead, to cross the river Styx without payment. He even moved the hearts of the eternally tormented Sisyphus, paused his boulder. Tantalus forgot his thirst. The Furies wept tears of blood. You hear his haunting melodies, piercing the eternal gloom. Finally, he stood before Hades, the grim king of the underworld, and his queen, Persephone. With his music, Orpheus pleaded for Eurydice's return, weaving a tale of such profound love and sorrow that even the unyielding rulers of the dead were moved to tears. Hades, incredibly, agreed. He would allow Eurydice to follow Orpheus back to the world of the living, but with one absolute condition. Orpheus must not look back at her until they had both safely reached the sunlight. You feel the immense tension of the moment, the delicate balance of hope and peril. They began their ascent, Eurydice's footsteps soft behind him, a faint whisper in the darkness. Orpheus walked on, his heart pounding, the light of the upper world growing stronger. But just as he reached the threshold of sunlight, his resolve wavered. Was she truly there? Was she well? Overcome with doubt, or perhaps simply an unbearable longing to see her face one last time, he glanced back. You feel the agonizing decision, the fatal moment of weakness. And there she was, a shadowy form, just barely in the light. Their eyes met for a fleeting instant, a gasp of recognition. But as he looked, she slipped away, drawn back into the darkness, a mere whisper on the wind, forever lost to him. Feel the crushing despair, the finality of her second death. Orpheus, heartbroken, returned to the upper world, his music now only capable of expressing his sorrow. He wandered inconsolable, refusing the love of other women. He was eventually torn apart by a group of Maenads, Dionysus's frenzied female worshippers, who were enraged by his rejection. His lyre was cast into a river, still singing, and his head floated to the island of Lesbos, where it continued to sing and utter prophecies. The myth of Orpheus and Eurydice is a timeless exploration of love, loss, and the limits of human defiance against fate. Often interpreted as a commentary on the power of art or the nature of memory, it serves as a stark reminder that even the most beautiful of passions can be undone by a single moment of doubt. Speaking of unrequited love and divine desires, let's consider the story of Apollo and Daphne. Apollo, the radiant god of light, music, and prophecy, was, like his father Zeus, prone to falling for mortals. One day, Apollo, puffed up with pride after slaying the monstrous python, mocked Eros Cupid, the god of love, for playing with arrows, suggesting they were only fit for a great archer like himself. You can almost hear Apollo's smug tone. Cronus, a notoriously mischievous and vengeful deity, decided to teach Apollo a lesson. He shot Apollo with a golden arrow, instilling in him an overwhelming, insatiable love. Then he shot the beautiful nymph Daphne, daughter of the river god Peneus, with a lead arrow, instilling in her an equally intense loathing for love and marriage. You feel the immediate, agonizing imbalance. Apollo, consumed by passion, relentlessly pursued Daphne. You hear his desperate pleas, his promises of eternal devotion. But Daphne, filled with repulsion, fled from him, terrified and disgusted. She was incredibly swift, but Apollo, a god, was faster. Just as he was about to catch her, Daphne, exhausted and desperate, cried out to her father, Peneus, to change her form and save her from Apollo's unwanted advances. Her father heard her plea. He watches her skin turn to bark, her hair to leaves, her arms to branches, and her feet to roots. She transformed into a laurel tree, her metamorphosis complete just as Apollo reached her. You feel the profound sadness of the transformation, the loss of human form for the sake of freedom. Apollo, heartbroken, embraced the tree, still feeling the faint warmth of her body. He declared that since she could not be his wife, she would forever be his sacred tree. From that day on, the laurel tree became Apollo's emblem, used to crown victors in poetic contests, Olympic games, and triumphant generals, a bittersweet symbol of unfulfilled desire and lasting artistic inspiration. The tale of Echo and Narcissus is another poignant story of unrequited love and divine retribution, showcasing the dangers of both obsessive self-love and the malicious use of language. Echo was a beautiful nymph, known for her lovely voice and ceaseless chatter. She was also a favorite companion of Hera, though this proved to be her undoing. One day, Echo distracted Hera with her incessant stories, while Zeus was off with one of his many nymph conquests. Hera, upon discovering the deception, furiously cursed Echo. "You will no longer be able to speak your mind, but only to repeat the last words spoken to you." You feel the crushing injustice, the cruel silence imposed on a talkative spirit. Poor Echo, now a mere vessel for others' words, fell desperately in love with Narcissus, a breathtakingly handsome youth who was famously arrogant and vain. He spurned all who loved him, completely absorbed in his own beauty. See Echo, hiding in the woods, unable to initiate conversation, only able to repeat his dismissive words back to him. When Narcissus haughtily asked, "Who's there?" Echo could only reply, "There." And when he scoffed, "Let's meet." She joyfully echoed, "Meet." But he merely mocked her. Heartbroken and rejected, Echo wasted away, until only her voice remained, echoing still in lonely places. Meanwhile, one of Narcissus's spurned lovers prayed to Nemesis, the goddess of retribution, that Narcissus should also know the pain of unrequited love. Nemesis answered. One hot day, Narcissus came upon a clear, still pool of water. As he bent to drink, he saw his own reflection and immediately fell deeply in love with it, believing it to be a beautiful water spirit. He became utterly captivated, unable to tear himself away. He yearned for the reflection, speaking to it, trying to embrace it, but it always eluded his touch. You feel the profound irony, the tragic self-imprisonment. He eventually wasted away, pining for an image that could never love him back, dying by the side of the pool. In its place, a beautiful flower bloomed, which we now call the Narcissus. The story is a profound cautionary tale about vanity and the destructive nature of self-obsession, giving us the term narcissism to describe those who are overly enamored with themselves. Innovation and its tragic consequences also find a place in Greek mythology, perhaps nowhere more vividly than in the tale of Daedalus and Icarus. Daedalus was a brilliant Athenian craftsman, architect, and inventor, so skilled that he was considered almost divine. He built the labyrinth for King Minos in Crete to house the Minotaur, a testament to his genius. However, after helping Theseus escape the labyrinth by providing Ariadne with the thread, Cronus, enraged by the betrayal, imprisoned Daedalus and his son Icarus in the very labyrinth he had designed, or perhaps in a high tower. You feel the irony of the master architect trapped by his own creation. Desperate to escape Minos' island kingdom, Daedalus conceived an audacious plan to fly. He gathered feathers, fashioned them with wax and linen thread, and constructed 2 sets of magnificent wings for himself and his son. You feel the sheer ingenuity, the groundbreaking ambition of this invention. As he prepared for flight, he gave Icarus a solemn warning. Do not fly too high, or the sun will melt the wax. Do not fly too low, or the sea will dampen the feathers. He was emphasizing the importance of the middle way, avoiding extremes. See the father's careful instruction, the son's youthful exuberance. They launched themselves into the air, soaring above the sea, a truly breathtaking sight, the first human beings to achieve flight. You feel the wind rushing past your face, the exhilaration of defying gravity. But Icarus, filled with the joy and hubris of youth, forgot his father's warning. He flew higher and higher, closer and closer to the sun. You feel the creeping dread, the inevitable doom. The heat of the sun melted the wax holding his feathers. They began to fall away, one by one. Icarus cried out to his father, then plunged into the sea and drowned. You hear the splash, the sudden silence, the profound tragedy of youthful recklessness. Daedalus, heartbroken, continued his flight, eventually landing on an island that would be named Icaria in his son's memory. The myth serves as a powerful allegory for the dangers of hubris, the importance of moderation, and the eternal conflict between human ambition and nature's limits. Another tale of youthful ambition and cosmic disaster involves Phaethon, son of Helios, the sun god. Phaethon lived as a mortal, often mocked by his peers for claiming divine parentage. To prove his identity, he journeyed to the magnificent palace of Helios. His father, overjoyed to see him, swore by the river Styx, that unbreakable oath again, that he would grant Phaethon any wish. Phaethon, without hesitation, wished to drive his father's son chariot for one day. You feel the immediate panic, the terrible implications of such a request. Helios, bound by his oath, desperately tried to dissuade his son. He warned him of the immense power of the horses, the treacherous path across the sky, the cosmic dangers. Filled with youthful confidence and the desire to prove himself, was unyielding. Reluctantly, Helios harnessed the 4 fiery, immortal horses to the golden chariot and gave Phaethon the reins, reiterating his warnings. You feel the immense, untamed power of the horses straining against the bit, the searing heat emanating from them. Phaethon was no match for them. The horses, sensing an inexperienced hand, veered wildly off course. They plunged too low, scorching the earth, drying up rivers, turning deserts into sand, and blackening the skin of the Ethiopians. You feel the intense heat, the desperate cries of mortals below, the immense ecological devastation. Then they soared too high, freezing the earth below and creating a terrible coldness in the cosmos. The entire world was thrown into chaos, threatened with complete destruction. Gaia, the earth, cried out to Zeus for help. Zeus, seeing the cosmic catastrophe unfolding, had no choice. With a heavy heart, he hurled a thunderbolt at Phaethon, striking him from the chariot. Phaethon fell from the sky, a blazing star, landing in the river Uranus, often identified as the Po River. His sisters, the Heliades, mourned him, turning into poplar trees, their tears becoming amber. You feel the terrible necessity of Zeus's action, the tragic loss of life for the sake of cosmic order. The myth is a powerful lesson in respecting divine power, the perils of youthful arrogance, and the catastrophic consequences of ambition unchecked by wisdom. These are but a few of the thousands of individual stories that populate the vast tapestry of Greek mythology. For every major god and hero, there were countless minor deities, nymphs of the trees, dryads of the waters, naiads, satyrs, centaurs, and a myriad of other creatures and spirits who wove their way into the lives of mortals. The world was alive with magic, every grove, every spring, every mountain peak imbued with a divine presence. People lived in constant awareness of the gods' temperaments, their love, their wrath, and their fickle nature. Yet, beyond the individual tales of passion and peril, there existed a deeper, more fundamental force that governed even the gods themselves, the Moirai, or fates. You perceive them not as distinct beings with personalities, but as abstract, unyielding forces. There were 3: Clotho, the spinner, who spun the thread of life; Chesis, the elater, who measured its length and assigned destiny; and Atropos, the unturnable, who cut the thread, determining the moment of death. You feel their cold, silent power, the unshakable certainty of their decree. Even Zeus, the king of the gods, could not defy the fates. He might alter an event or postpone a doom, but the ultimate thread of destiny, the beginning and the end of all things, was in their hands. This underscores a profound aspect of Greek thought, that there was a cosmic order, a principle of destiny that transcended even the will of the mightiest gods. It's a comforting, or perhaps terrifying thought, that even in a world of chaotic divine meddling, there was an underlying structure, a grand, predetermined design. As the centuries rolled on, the nature of these myths began to shift. The overtly active, often physical, presence of the gods started to recede, moving further into the background of human affairs. The heroic age, with its direct divine parentage and grand monsters, gave way to a focus on human reason, philosophy, and political organization. Historians and philosophers in ancient Greece, figures like Thucydides and Plato, began to analyze the world through a more rational lens, questioning the literal truth of the myths. Even as they continued to draw moral and philosophical lessons from them, the gods became less about direct intervention and more about symbolic representation of human qualities, natural forces, or moral dilemmas. The world wasn't necessarily less magical, but the magic became more subtle, more internalized. It's like the universe collectively decided to transition from an action movie to a more contemplative drama. Alpha, even as the direct worship of the Olympian gods eventually faded with the rise of new religions and empires. The stories themselves did not die. Oh no, the Greek myths, with their vibrant characters, their epic conflicts, their profound explorations of love and loss, good and evil, wisdom and folly, became the bedrock of Western civilization. You see their indelible mark everywhere. Think of the language you speak. Words like Atlas from the Titan who held the sky, Echo, the cursed nymph, Narcissism, the self-obsessed youth, Tantalize the tormented king, Labyrinth, Daedalus, Maze, Chaos, the primordial void, Titanic, the immense power of the early gods, Herculean, from Heracles' strength. These tales became the inspiration for countless works of art, from ancient sculptures that captured the majestic beauty of Zeus and Athena, to Renaissance paintings that depicted the drama of Apollo and Daphne, to modern-day films and video games that reimagined Perseus fighting Medusa or Heracles facing the Hydra. You can find them in the soaring verses of epic poetry, in the profound tragedies of the stage, and in the enduring narratives of novels. The Muses, those daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, continued to inspire poets, artists, and thinkers for millennia, long after the temples lay in ruin. Philosophers wrestled with the concepts of fate versus free will, justice versus vengeance, morality versus divine whim. All themes deeply embedded in the myths. Psychologists, centuries later, found archetypes and complexes in these stories that resonated with the human psyche. The Oedipus complex, the Electra complex, the Narcissus complex, demonstrating how these ancient narratives tapped into universal human experiences and dilemmas. Even today, when you hear a story of a difficult journey, you might call it an Odyssey. When someone has a single, fatal weakness, it's their Achilles heel. When a clever trick leads to downfall, it's a Trojan horse. These aren't just quaint old stories. They are the fundamental narratives that shape our understanding of the world, our language, and even ourselves. They are the ancestral memories of humanity's creative spirit, passed down through generations, still vibrant and resonant in our modern age. And so, dear listener, we reach the end of our bedtime history of the entire story of Greek mythology. You have journeyed through the swirling void of chaos, felt the emergence of Gaia, witnessed the rise and fall of Titans, stood on Olympus among the mighty Olympians, and walked alongside heroes and monsters on the plains of ancient Greece. You've seen love and betrayal, courage and cowardice, creation and destruction, all played out on a cosmic stage by beings who are both divine and terribly, wonderfully human in their flaws. The flickering lamp of our imagination now casts longer shadows. The scent of dried herbs begins to soften, and the distant salt spray whispers more faintly. The grand, sprawling narrative of Greek mythology, with all its chaotic beauty and profound truth, begins to recede, leaving behind a gentle hum, an echo of ancient voices. The gods and heroes, the monsters and maidens, they drift back into the quiet realms of myth, where they continue their eternal dances. Their endless squabbles, their enduring quests, forever preserved in the stories we tell. You have walked among them, an unseen guest, feeling the tremors of their power and the pangs of their sorrow. Now, as the last vestiges of their world gently fade, allow your own world to grow quiet once more. The vastness of chaos, the solidity of Gaia, the brilliance of Olympus, the quiet depths of the underworld, they are all safely tucked away within the boundless reaches of your imagination. The whispers of gods and the legends of heroes will always be there, just beneath the surface, waiting for another soft light, another quiet moment to stir and dance anew. Rest easy now, knowing that these ancient tales, like the stars themselves, continue to shine, timeless and unchanging. Always there, just beyond the veil of sleep. Good night.